Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1. When I moved in, the place seemed perfect, affordable, quiet, no shared walls. But on the second night, I heard breathing, not mine, heavy wheezing like someone struggling through a bad dream. I pressed my ear to the bedroom wall. The sound wasn't muffled like a neighbor's would be. It was close, too close. I knocked once. The breathing stopped. That silence was worse than the noise. The next day, I examined the wall more closely. Behind the peeling wallpaper, I found a thin seam. I followed it to a corner panel, loosely nailed. Inside was a crawl space. The floor was coated in dust, except for a clean path where someone had clearly been moving. At the end of the path, curled in the dark, was a mattress, and on it a recorder. The tape had one phrase looped over and over: "You're not supposed to be here." I sat on my heels, staring at that recorder until my knees ached. The voice was gravelly, aged, but there was something deliberately measured about each word, like a threat that had been practiced. I rewound the tape, played it again. The same phrase, again, the same cadence, the same emphasis on supposed. My hands were shaking as I pressed stop. The mattress was stained, dark patches that could have been anything. I didn't want to think about what they were. The smell in that crawl space wasn't just dust and mold. There was something organic underneath, sweet and sick. I backed out, replaced the panel, but I couldn't forget what I'd seen. The next morning, I called the landlord. He was a small man with nervous eyes who kept checking his watch while we talked. I mentioned the wall, the panel. He claimed he knew nothing about any crawl space, but when I described the exact location, his face went pale. He mumbled something about previous tenants, structural issues, things that weren't his responsibility anymore. I pressed him for names, contact information for whoever lived here before me. He gave me a first name only, said she was quiet, paid rent regularly, then one day just disappeared. Left her deposit, left her furniture. The way he said disappeared made my stomach turn. People don't just vanish. They run from something, or someone makes them disappear. That afternoon, I went to the local police station. The desk sergeant was helpful enough, pulled up missing person reports from the past few years. 3 women had been reported missing from this area. All young, all living alone, all described as quiet by their landlords. The files were thin, a few witness statements, some basic background checks, then nothing. Cases gone cold. I asked to speak with the detective who handled the investigations. She was a tired-looking woman with graying hair who studied me carefully before answering my questions. She remembered the cases, especially the most recent one. The missing woman had been my age, worked remotely, kept to herself. Her sister had reported her missing when she stopped answering calls. The detective had searched the apartment, found it clean, organized, with no signs of struggle, just empty. But there was something else. The detective mentioned that neighbors had reported strange sounds coming from the building, breathing, movement in the walls, voices. The reports were scattered across different units, different floors. Each complaint was filed separately, so no one had connected them until now. I felt the blood drain from my face. I returned to my apartment with a new understanding. This wasn't just my wall, my crawl space. There was a network of passages running through the building, connecting units, allowing someone to move unseen. The breathing I'd heard wasn't coming from inside my wall. It was coming from someone traveling through it. That evening I sat in my living room with all the lights on, listening. The building was old, full of settling sounds, but I was learning to distinguish between normal creaks and something else. Around midnight I heard it, soft footsteps above my head, moving from one side of the ceiling to the other. Then silence. Then the breathing again, closer than before. I grabbed a flashlight and returned to the crawl space. This time I crawled deeper, following the clean path until it branched off in two directions. One led toward what I assumed was the neighboring unit. The other went down toward the basement. I chose the basement path. The space opened into a larger area beneath the building's foundation. There were more mattresses here, more personal items, clothes, books, photographs. Someone had been living down here or keeping people down here. The photographs showed women I didn't recognize, but their faces were familiar from the missing person files. They looked happy in the pictures, unaware of what was coming. In the corner, I found a journal. The handwriting was careful, methodical. It detailed movements, schedules, habits. The writer had been watching the building's residents, learning their routines, planning something. The entries went back months, maybe years. Each woman was described in clinical detail: when they came home, when they left, when they were most vulnerable. The final entry was dated just days before I moved in. It mentioned a mistake with the previous tenant, someone who had fought back and ruined everything. The writer seemed frustrated, planning to be more careful next time. The entry ended with a note about the new tenant, me, and how I seemed perfect for the project. I photographed every page, every detail I could find, then made my way back to my apartment. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, the crawl space was empty. The mattresses, the photographs, the journal, everything was gone. Only the stains remained, and even those seemed fainter than before. The detective who had handled the missing person cases came to examine the space. She took samples of the stains, photographed the area, interviewed me for hours. But without the evidence I'd seen, without the journal or photographs, there wasn't much to go on, just my word against empty walls. The investigation continued for weeks. They searched the building thoroughly, found more hidden passages, more evidence of someone living in the spaces between apartments. But whoever had been using them was gone, vanished as completely as the women they'd been watching. I moved out within the month, but the case stayed with me. I kept in touch with the detective, followed the investigation as it slowly went cold. No arrests were made, no bodies were found. The missing women remained missing, and whoever had been hunting them remained free. Sometimes I wonder if I was meant to find that crawl space, if I was meant to become part of whatever plan had been written in that journal. Other times I think about the timing, how everything disappeared so quickly after I discovered it, how perfectly the space was cleaned. It makes me question what I really saw, what I really found. The building was demolished 6 months later. The city cited structural issues, safety concerns, but I know the real reason. Some places hold too many secrets, too much darkness. Sometimes the only solution is to tear everything down and start over. I still get calls from the detective occasionally. New cases, similar patterns. Women disappearing from old buildings, neighbors reporting strange sounds in the walls. The investigation continues, but the answers remain hidden. Somewhere out there, someone is still watching, still planning, still moving through spaces we don't even know exist. The recording haunts me most, that voice saying, "You're not supposed to be here." I've wondered if it was meant for the women who disappeared, or for me when I found their hiding place. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was a warning I should have heeded before I went looking for answers I wasn't prepared to find. The walls in my new place are solid concrete. No hidden passages, no secret spaces. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear breathing that isn't mine. And I wonder if the problem wasn't the building at all, but something that followed me when I left. Crime 2, I barely checked the mailbox, just bills, junk. But then I noticed envelopes with no stamps, no return address. Inside were handwritten letters, always on yellowed paper. They were addressed to someone with my last name, and the details matched. The same allergies, the same scar on the left knee, but the life described wasn't mine. There were references to a sibling I don't have, a job I never worked, a place I've never lived. Each letter ended with a warning: don't open the red door. I didn't even know I had a red door until I looked behind the bookshelf. Sure enough, there it was, chained shut, painted bright red. The next letter said, "You looked, now we both pay." The handwriting was careful, deliberate. Each letter formed with the precision of someone who had practiced the same words over and over. I spread them across my kitchen table, studying the patterns. The paper felt strange under my fingertips, not quite old enough to crumble, but aged in a way that suggested it had been stored somewhere dark and humid for months. I started keeping a notebook, documenting each letter as it arrived. They came irregularly, sometimes 3 in 1 week, then nothing for 2 weeks. The postmark was always local, but the sorting facility was different each time, as if someone was driving to different parts of the region to mail them. The details about my life were unsettling in their accuracy. The writer knew about the small birthmark on my shoulder, the way I organized my kitchen cabinets with labels facing out, even my habit of leaving the bathroom light on when I sleep. But then came the discrepancies that made my skin crawl. They described conversations with my brother about our childhood dog, except I'm an only child and never had a pet. They mentioned my promotion at the accounting firm downtown, but I work remotely for a software company. I began checking the mailbox obsessively, sometimes twice a day. My neighbors probably thought I was expecting something important. The mailman, a stocky man with graying temples, started nodding at me with a knowing smile that made me uncomfortable. When I finally worked up the courage to ask him about the unstamped letters, he looked genuinely confused. "Can't say I've noticed anything unusual," he said, adjusting his cap. "But then again, I just deliver what's sorted for me. Could be coming from someone with a key." The thought of someone else having access to my mailbox sent a chill through me. I requested a lock change from the postal service, but the letters kept coming. I decided to investigate the red door more thoroughly. Moving the bookshelf required dismantling half my living room, but behind it was indeed a door I'd never noticed. The red paint was fresh, applied over what looked like the original white paint beneath. The chains were new too, heavy-duty hardware store quality, secured with a padlock I didn't recognize. The smell behind the bookshelf was musty, like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. I pressed my ear against the door and heard nothing, no creaking, no settling sounds that would indicate a room beyond, just silence. I started researching the history of my house. The county records showed it was built in the late 1970s by a local contractor. I was the third owner. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had lived there for 15 years before moving to assisted living. Before her, there was a young family, a couple with 2 children who had owned it for about 8 years. I tracked down the elderly woman's contact information through the assisted living facility. When I called, her voice was thin but alert. She remembered the house well, she said, particularly the odd additions the previous owners had made. They were secretive people, she told me, always working on projects, but they never wanted to talk about them. There were sounds coming from that house at all hours, hammering, drilling, and visitors. So many visitors, but they never stayed long. When I asked about a red door, she went quiet for a long moment. "I wouldn't know about that," she said finally. "I made it a point not to go looking for things that weren't my business." The letters continued, but their tone began to shift. The warnings became more specific, more urgent. "The lock won't hold much longer," one read. What's behind there wants out more than you want to keep it in. Another simply said, check the basement floor beneath the door. I didn't have a basement. My house was built on a slab foundation, but I found myself crawling under the house anyway, flashlight in hand, looking for any sign of disturbance in the concrete. What I found was a section of the foundation that looked different, newer concrete, poorly matched to the original pour. The letters started arriving daily now. The handwriting was becoming increasingly erratic, the words sometimes pressed so hard into the paper that they tore through. One letter contained only a single sentence repeated 27 times. They know you know. I installed a security camera pointed at my mailbox, but it captured nothing unusual. The letters simply appeared as if they materialized inside the box overnight. I began staying awake, watching from my window, but I never saw anyone approach. The breaking point came when I found a letter that wasn't addressed to me at all. It was addressed to the previous owner, the elderly woman, but the handwriting was different, older, shakier. It was a confession, written in the first person, describing the burial of what couldn't be allowed to live. I called the police, but they were skeptical. Unstamped mail wasn't exactly their priority, and when they examined the red door, they suggested I simply have a locksmith remove the chains if I was curious about what was behind it. Probably just storage, the officer said. Previous owners sometimes section off areas for different purposes. But I knew it wasn't storage. The smell had gotten stronger, and sometimes I could swear I heard something, not quite scratching, not quite tapping, but a rhythmic sound that seemed to come from somewhere beneath the floor. The final letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was thicker than the others, multiple pages of the same careful handwriting. It told a story about a child who asked too many questions, who saw things that weren't meant to be seen. About parents who made a choice that seemed necessary at the time, who convinced themselves they were protecting everyone involved. The letter ended differently this time. Instead of a warning, it was an apology. I'm sorry you had to learn this way. I'm sorry it took so long to tell someone. I'm sorry about what you're going to find. I never opened the red door. I moved out of the house 2 weeks later, leaving everything behind. The new owners can deal with whatever is chained up back there. Sometimes I wonder if they're getting letters too, if someone is trying to tell them the same story in the same careful handwriting. But mostly I try not to think about it. I try not to think about the sound I heard on my last night in that house, the sound of chains rattling, as if something had finally learned how to break free. Crime 3, I was just trying to declutter. The facility was cheap, and the manager barely looked up when I signed the lease. My assigned unit was in the far corner, door already open. Inside were black garbage bags stacked neatly, floor to ceiling. I assumed they belonged to someone else, maybe a mistake. But then I noticed a clipboard on the wall with my name printed on top. The list beneath it included items I hadn't brought. Hairbrush, socks, Polaroids, tooth. I opened one of the bags. Inside was a bundle of clothes, mine. Things I'd lost years ago, things I never even remembered losing. The worst part wasn't finding my belongings. It was the second clipboard in the next unit, with a list that ended in, "Watch how they react." My hands trembled as I held that clipboard. The paper felt damp, like it had been handled too many times by sweaty fingers. The handwriting was neat, methodical, each item crossed off with a red pen. The smell in that storage unit wasn't just dust and cardboard boxes. There was something else underneath, something organic, sweet but wrong, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. I should have called someone. Instead, I found myself opening more bags. Each one contained pieces of my life I thought were gone forever. A sweater I'd worn in college, missing for over a decade. notebooks filled with my handwriting from years I could barely remember, photographs of me sleeping taken from angles that suggested someone had been inside my bedroom. The Polaroids were dated, but the dates made no sense. Some were from last month, others from years ago. The facility manager's office was just a trailer parked behind the main building. When I knocked, a woman answered. She was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes that didn't match the situation. I told her about the mix-up, about finding my belongings in a unit I'd never rented before. She listened without interrupting, then pulled out a thick folder. "You've been renting from us for 8 years, she said, flipping through papers. "Same unit, always paid on schedule." The rental agreements bore my signature, my real signature, not a forgery. The payments came from my bank account, small automatic deductions I'd apparently never noticed. According to their records, I'd been coming here regularly, sometimes multiple times per week. The security cameras would have footage, she said, but those recordings were kept in another building. I didn't remember any of it. Back in the unit, I found more than just my belongings. There were items that belonged to other people, jewelry, clothing, personal effects that felt intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. A child's drawing signed with a name I didn't recognize, wedding rings still in their boxes, a diary written in someone else's handwriting, but describing events from my life with perfect accuracy. The entries were detailed. They described my daily routines, my favorite restaurants, the route I took to work. They mentioned conversations I'd had with friends, arguments I'd forgotten, dreams I'd never told anyone about. But they were written from someone else's perspective, as if they'd been watching me, studying me, documenting every aspect of my existence. Near the bottom of one bag, I found a cell phone, an old model, scratched and worn. When I powered it on, it contained hundreds of photos and videos. Most were of me taken from a distance, walking to my car, sitting in coffee shops, sleeping in my own bed, but scattered among them were images of other people, strangers going about their daily lives, unaware they were being documented. The phone had a contact list, just first names, no last names, but I recognized some of them. People I knew, people I'd dated, coworkers, neighbors. Next to each name was a number, like a ranking system. My name was at the top of the list, followed by a number that was significantly higher than the others. I called one of the numbers. A woman answered, her voice cautious. When I mentioned the storage facility, she went quiet. After a long pause, she told me she'd been getting strange calls for months. Someone would dial her number and just listen, breathing into the phone. Sometimes they'd whisper her name before hanging up. She changed her number twice, but somehow the calls always found her. The security footage from the facility showed me entering and leaving the unit regularly, but watching myself on those grainy videos felt like looking at a stranger. The person on screen moved differently than I did, with a confidence I didn't recognize. They knew exactly where everything was, handled the bags with familiarity, sometimes stayed for hours at a stretch. In one video, I could see myself talking to someone just outside the frame, having a conversation, gesturing with my hands, occasionally laughing. But the timestamp showed this happened during hours I knew I'd been at work. I checked my employment records, my phone's location history, even my credit card statements. Everything confirmed I'd been somewhere else entirely when these videos were recorded. The tooth on the clipboard list was in a small plastic bag at the bottom of one of the containers. It was human, adult, with a distinctive gold filling. I touched my tongue to my own teeth, feeling for any gaps, any missing pieces. Everything seemed intact. But when I looked in the mirror later, I noticed something I'd never seen before, a small scar on my gum where a tooth might have been removed. The tissue was healed old, like it had happened years ago. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything I could remember about my daily activities. But when I compared my entries to the ones in the diary I'd found, there were discrepancies, not just in small details, but in major events. According to the diary, I'd had conversations I couldn't recall, visited places I'd never been, made decisions that didn't align with my personality. The strangest part was how normal everything felt when I wasn't actively thinking about it. Days would pass where I'd forget about the storage unit entirely. The whole experience would seem like a bad dream until I'd find myself standing in my kitchen, holding a receipt for storage unit rental fees, with no memory of how it got there. I hired a private investigator. She was professional, asked the right questions, took detailed notes. But when she called me back a week later, her voice was different, distant. She said she'd looked into everything, found nothing suspicious, and was returning my deposit. The report she mailed contained 3 pages of generic statements about storage facilities and identity theft prevention. Nothing about what I'd actually asked her to investigate. When I tried calling her back, the number was disconnected. The last entry in the diary was dated yesterday. It described a conversation I'd had with my neighbor about the weather, mentioned what I'd eaten for dinner, noted that I'd been having trouble sleeping. All of it was accurate, but I knew I hadn't written it. The handwriting was similar to mine, but not identical. The pen strokes were more careful, deliberate, like someone had been practicing. I've started sleeping with the lights on, not because I'm afraid of the dark, but because I've been finding evidence of sleepwalking. Muddy footprints leading from my front door to my bedroom. Car keys in different places than where I left them. Miles on my odometer that don't match my daily driving. Yesterday I found a new key on my keychain. It's small, brass, with numbers etched into the side. The numbers match a different storage unit at the same facility. When I checked with the manager, she confirmed that I'd been renting that unit too, for 3 years apparently. The rental agreement has my signature, but I have no memory of signing it. I haven't opened that second unit yet. Part of me knows I should just walk away, pretend none of this happened, go back to my normal life. But normal doesn't exist anymore. Every routine feels like performance, every memory feels suspect. I catch myself wondering which version of my life is real and which one has been carefully constructed by someone else. The key sits on my kitchen table now, next to my morning coffee. I stare at it while I plan my day, while I try to convince myself that I'm in control of my own choices. But I know I'm going to use it eventually. I know I'm going to find out what's in that second unit, even though I already suspect I won't like what I discover. The clipboard in the original unit has been updated. There's a new entry at the bottom, written in that careful handwriting that almost looks like mine. It says, "Subject is becoming aware, prepare for next phase." I don't know who's been watching me, or why, or how long this has been going on. I don't know if I'm a victim or a participant or something else entirely. But I'm starting to understand that the person I think I am might not be the person I actually am. And the scariest part is that I'm not sure I want to find out the difference. Crime 4, I don't know how I missed it. I've scrubbed those tiles 100 times, but there it was, low, square, no handle, just a hairline seam in the grout. One day the steam made it swell just enough to crack open. I pulled. Inside was a narrow tunnel lined with mirrors, the weird kind, distorted funhouse style, except every reflection looked off, taller, bonier. One even grinned when I didn't. I backed out and slammed the door shut, but it doesn't stay closed anymore. Every morning I find it cracked. There are wet footprints leading from the shower drain, and sometimes the mirror across the room fogs up, even when I haven't used the water. That was 6 months ago when I first moved into this rental house. The landlord had been eager to rent it out, almost desperate. The price was too good to be true for such a nice neighborhood. Now I understand why. The footprints weren't mine, too small, too narrow. child-sized but with an odd gait pattern that left deeper impressions on the heel. I started taking photographs, measuring them against my own feet. The more I documented, the more questions arose. These weren't random watermarks. They formed a deliberate path from the shower drain to the hallway, always stopping at the same floorboard that creaked when stepped on. I decided to investigate the house's history. The county records office became my second home. Property transfers, police reports, anything that might explain what I was experiencing. The house had changed hands 7 times in 15 years. Every previous tenant had broken their lease early, citing maintenance issues or family emergencies. But buried in the paperwork, I found something else. A missing person report from 3 years ago, a young girl who had lived here with her foster family. The report was thin, almost dismissively brief. She had simply vanished one morning, leaving behind wet clothes in the bathroom and no other trace. The foster parents claimed she must have run away, though she'd left all her belongings behind, including a worn stuffed animal she reportedly never slept without. The investigating officer's notes were sparse, almost careless. No follow-up interviews, no expanded searches. Case closed within a week as a runaway, but something about the handwriting bothered me. The officer's signature was illegible, but there was a phone number scribbled in the margin. When I called it, a woman answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. She identified herself as the foster mother. Her voice carried a tremor that suggested she'd been expecting this call for years. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. She was smaller than I'd imagined, with prematurely gray hair and hands that wouldn't stop moving. She ordered nothing, just sat there picking at the table's edge while I drank coffee that tasted like metal. She told me about the girl's final week, how she'd started talking about voices coming from the bathroom walls, how she'd refused to shower alone, claiming someone was watching her through cracks that nobody else could see. The foster mother had dismissed it as trauma response, another damaged child acting out. On the last morning, she'd heard the shower running for hours. When she finally checked, the bathroom was empty, the window still locked from the inside. The foster mother's husband had died the year after. Heart attack, she said, but her eyes suggested otherwise. She'd moved across the country, but the guilt followed her. She gave me a box of the girl's things that she'd never turned over to the police. Inside were drawings, dozens of them, all depicting the same thing: mirrors with wrong reflections, doorways that led nowhere, and footprints that walked backwards. I brought the drawings home and compared them to what I'd been documenting. The similarities were undeniable. The same distorted mirror angles, the same narrow doorway, even the same heel-heavy footprint pattern. But one drawing was different. It showed 2 sets of footprints, the small ones I'd been seeing and larger ones that matched my own size perfectly. That night I waited in the bathroom with the lights off. The door cracked open by itself just after midnight. Through the gap I could see movement in the tunnel beyond. Not reflections this time, but actual shadows shifting between the mirrors. I crawled inside, ignoring every instinct screaming at me to stop. The tunnel was longer than it appeared from outside, stretching back into darkness that my phone's flashlight couldn't penetrate. The mirrors weren't just distorted, they were showing different scenes. Some reflected the bathroom as it was now, others as it might have been years ago. In one, I saw a small figure huddled in the corner, looking directly at me with eyes that held too much understanding for a child. At the tunnel's end, I found a small alcove. Inside were more drawings, fresher than the ones in the box. These showed me exploring the tunnel, taking photographs, meeting with the foster mother. Someone had been watching me, documenting my investigation just as I'd been documenting the footprints. I heard breathing behind me, close enough to feel on my neck. When I turned, there was nothing but mirrors reflecting my terrified face back at me infinitely. but in one reflection, standing just behind my shoulder, was a figure too tall to be the missing girl, an adult wearing clothes that looked familiar. It took me a moment to realize I was looking at the foster father who'd supposedly died of a heart attack. I scrambled back through the tunnel, my phone's light flickering and dying. In the darkness, I heard whispers, conversations between voices I recognized from old police recordings I'd found online. The investigating officer who'd closed the case so quickly. The foster father. Other voices I couldn't identify but somehow knew were connected to this house, to this hidden space behind the shower wall. I made it back to the bathroom, slamming the door shut and pushing my dresser against it. But the whispers continued, seeping through the walls now, discussing my investigation in detail. They knew about the photographs, the county records, the coffee shop meeting. They'd been watching every step, allowing me to uncover just enough truth to become complicit. The next morning, the foster mother called me. Her voice was different, calmer. She asked if I'd found what I was looking for in the tunnel. I hadn't told her about the tunnel. I'd barely mentioned the door. When I confronted her about this, she laughed, a sound that raised goosebumps on my arms. She explained that some investigations are designed to investigate the investigator. I've stopped trying to keep the door closed. The footprints appear whether I want them to or not. But now I notice other things. How my own reflections sometimes lag behind my movements. How my phone's photo gallery contains pictures I don't remember taking. How my handwriting in my investigation notes occasionally shifts to match the illegible signature I found in the police report. The missing girl might have run away after all, but I'm starting to understand that this house doesn't just hide victims, it creates them. And everyone who tries to solve its mysteries becomes part of the next puzzle for the next investigator to find. The door stays open now. Sometimes I catch myself standing in front of it, drawn by whispers that sound increasingly like my own voice, discussing a new case with the patience of someone who has all the time in the world to wait for the next curious tenant to move in. Crime 5, it started vibrating in the middle of the night. No missed calls, no notifications, just a folder full of audio files I didn't remember creating. The labels were strings of random letters. I hit play. The first file was just breathing, slow and deliberate. The second was a whispered phrase, "I see you." The third was different. It was a recording of me talking in my sleep. Only I wasn't asleep. I was awake when it was recorded. And in the background I heard a second voice, quiet, close, speaking a language I didn't recognize. I tried deleting the files. They reappeared. I factory reset the phone, still there. Now every morning there's a new one, and the voice, it's getting clearer. The investigation began with something most people would dismiss. Technology glitches happen, phones malfunction. But when you've worked missing persons cases for years, you learn to trust the details that don't fit. The breathing patterns in those recordings were too measured, too intentional. Someone was listening to me sleep, and they were close enough to capture conversations I didn't remember having. I started mapping my daily routines, checking door locks twice, examining windows for scratches or tampering. Nothing obvious emerged, but the recordings kept coming. Each morning brought a new file, always captured when I should have been alone. The quality was too clear for a surveillance device planted from outside. This was intimate audio, recorded from within my personal space. The breakthrough came when I analyzed the background sounds more carefully. Beneath my voice and the mysterious whispers, there was something else, a rhythmic tapping, almost like Morse code. I played it back dozens of times until I recognized the pattern. It was the sound of fingernails drumming against wood, specifically the grain pattern of my kitchen table. That's when I realized someone had been inside my apartment. I contacted the building management, claiming I needed to review security footage for insurance purposes. The superintendent was helpful enough, walking me through weeks of hallway recordings. Most tenants came and went predictably, but there was one anomaly. A figure appeared regularly in the early morning hours, always wearing a maintenance uniform and carrying what looked like standard repair equipment. The problem was simple. Our building had no scheduled maintenance during those periods. I studied the footage more closely. The person moved with familiarity, using a key rather than picking locks or forcing entry. They knew exactly which apartment to visit and how long they could stay without being noticed. The uniform was authentic enough to fool casual observers, but something about their posture suggested this wasn't their actual profession. When I checked with other tenants, a disturbing pattern emerged. 3 neighbors mentioned small disturbances they'd attributed to normal apartment living. Items moved slightly, unexplained sounds, the feeling of being watched. None had reported these incidents because each seemed insignificant alone. But together they painted a picture of systematic intrusion. The recordings became my evidence, but they were also my torment. Each file revealed more about how closely I was being monitored. The mysterious voice spoke during conversations I had with friends, commenting on private details only someone physically present could know. They knew when I ordered takeout, when I paid bills, when I called my family. Most disturbing was their knowledge of things I'd never spoken aloud. I decided to test my theory by setting subtle traps, rearranging items in specific ways, leaving papers in precise positions, placing tape on doors and windows. Every morning something had been disturbed. The intruder was still visiting, still recording, still listening. The voice in the recordings began addressing me directly, as if they knew I was analyzing the files. They mentioned details from my investigation, referenced conversations I'd had with building management, even quoted text messages I'd sent to friends about the situation. The boundary between victim and investigator was dissolving. That's when I noticed something that changed everything. One recording captured a phone conversation I'd had with a colleague about the case, but there was an impossible detail. The voice commenting in the background knew information I hadn't shared during that call, information I'd only thought about, never spoken. Either the intruder had access to sources beyond my apartment, or they understood my investigation better than I understood it myself. I started questioning my own memory. Were these recordings actually capturing real events, or was I experiencing something more complex? The timestamps on the files didn't always align with my recollections. Some seemed to document conversations that felt familiar, but which I couldn't specifically remember having. The final recording arrived on a morning when I was certain I'd slept elsewhere. I'd stayed with a friend, told no one about the change in plans, and kept my phone in airplane mode. Yet there it was, a new file, crystal clear audio of me supposedly sleeping in my own bed, talking to someone who responded with detailed knowledge of my personal history. I listened to myself describing childhood memories I'd never shared with anyone, discussing fears I'd barely acknowledged to myself. The other voice asked leading questions, guided the conversation, demonstrated an intimacy that suggested years of observation rather than recent intrusion. But here's what haunts me most. I don't remember any of those conversations happening. The investigation led me to uncomfortable possibilities. Maybe the intruder wasn't a stranger after all. Maybe they had legitimate access to my space, my routine, my private thoughts. Maybe the recordings were documenting something I was participating in willingly but couldn't consciously recall. Or maybe I was creating the recordings myself. The voice that seemed so foreign in those early files had grown familiar over weeks of analysis. Sometimes when I played them back, I could almost predict what it would say next. The breathing patterns matched my own when I was deeply focused. The knowledge of my personal details suddenly seemed less mysterious. I stopped checking the building security footage. I stopped setting traps. I stopped trying to identify the intruder because I was beginning to suspect that the person I was looking for might be looking back at me from the mirror. The recordings still appear each morning. I still listen to them, still analyze the background sounds, still search for clues about who's watching me. But now I wonder if the question isn't who's recording these conversations, it's why I can't remember having them. And whether the voice getting clearer is actually my own. Crime 6, I bought it secondhand, no big deal. It looked clean enough, but after a few weeks I noticed something poking through the lining underneath. I pulled at the tier and out slid a photo. Black and white, slightly curled at the edges. It showed a person sleeping. At first I thought it was just someone random. Then I noticed the wallpaper in the background, same as mine. I ripped the seam further. Dozens of photos poured out, all of people in this apartment. None of them were me. But all of them were taken from the same angle, the corner where the ceiling meets the wall. I checked. There was a hole up there, just big enough for a lens. The photos felt cold between my fingers, like they'd been buried in ice. Each face captured in the vulnerability of sleep, unaware they were being watched. Some photos showed the same people across different seasons. I could tell by the clothing, the way light fell through the window blinds. Someone had been documenting the lives of strangers for what looked like years. I spread them across my kitchen table, searching for patterns. The oldest ones had that sepia tint of decades past. The newest still smelled faintly of developing chemicals. My stomach twisted when I realized the most recent photo showed bedsheets I'd seen hanging on the neighbor's balcony just last week. This wasn't some random collection. Someone was still active. That afternoon, I knocked on apartment doors, carrying a few photos in my jacket pocket. Most neighbors slammed their doors after glimpsing the images, but an elderly woman 3 floors down invited me inside. Her hands shook as she examined a photo of a young man sprawled across rumpled sheets. "That's my grandson," she whispered. "He lived here 2 summers ago, working construction. Said he felt like someone was watching him sleep. We thought he was just paranoid from working too hard." She told me about others who'd lived in my unit. A single mother who'd moved out after finding her apartment key in strange places. A college student who'd sworn someone was entering his room while he worked late shifts. All had reported the same feeling of being observed, but building management had dismissed their concerns. The woman's voice dropped to barely audible. "The previous tenant in your unit," she came to me crying one evening, said she'd found photos of herself hidden inside her own furniture. Building manager told her she was imagining things, that she'd probably taken them herself during a mental episode. My throat felt dry. What happened to her? She disappeared, left everything behind. That's how the couch ended up being sold with the unit. I returned to my apartment with new purpose, examining every piece of furniture the previous tenant had abandoned. Inside the back of a picture frame, I found a note written in shaky handwriting. "He has keys. He comes when you're not home. Check your things. He puts the photos back where you'll find them." The building manager's office was cramped and smelled of stale coffee. He was a thin man with nervous energy, constantly checking his phone while I explained my discovery. His reaction struck me as rehearsed, too quick, with explanations about previous tenants being unstable, about the building's history of attracting problematic individuals. "You seem like a reasonable person," he said, sliding a lease renewal across his desk. "Why don't we forget about this situation? I can offer you 2 months free rent." His eagerness to silence me felt wrong. I declined the offer and asked to see maintenance records for my unit. He claimed they'd been lost in a recent system update. When I pressed him about the hole in my ceiling, he insisted it was from old plumbing work, nothing suspicious. That evening I examined the hole more carefully with a flashlight. Fresh scratches around the edges suggested recent use. Dust patterns indicated something had been removed and replaced repeatedly. I sealed it with tape and waited. The next morning, the tape was gone. I installed a camera facing the hole and left for work. The footage showed a figure entering my apartment using a key, carefully removing my seal and examining the hole with professional familiarity. The person's face remained hidden under a cap, but their movements were methodical, practiced. More disturbing was what happened next. The figure walked through my apartment, touching my belongings with an intimacy that made my skin crawl. They lingered at my bed, my closet, places where I felt most vulnerable. Before leaving, they placed something under my pillow. I found it when I returned home. Another photograph, this one in color. It showed me sleeping the previous night, taken from that same angle. On the back, someone had written, "You're more photogenic than the others." The building records I requested through a lawyer revealed a pattern spanning decades. Complaints about intrusions, missing personal items, residents reporting feeling watched, all from my specific unit, all dismissed by the same building manager. Some of the complainants had moved out suddenly, leaving behind furniture and personal belongings that would later be sold with the unit to new tenants. I found contact information for some former residents. Those who agreed to speak shared similar experiences. Strange sounds at night, the feeling of being photographed, personal items moved slightly while they were away. One woman told me she'd found a collection of her own hair bands hidden inside her bathroom medicine cabinet, arranged with obsessive precision. The building manager kept insisting I was having stress-related episodes, she said. He offered to help me find a therapist. When I refused to drop the matter, he suggested I might be happier living elsewhere. The pattern became clear. Someone with access to the building was systematically targeting residents of my unit, documenting their private moments, then gaslighting them when they complained. The building manager's involvement wasn't coincidental. He was either complicit or the perpetrator himself. I began documenting everything, but each piece of evidence seemed to disappear. Photos I'd hidden were found and removed. Notes I'd written vanished from secure locations. Someone was always one step ahead, always watching, always adapting to my attempts at detection. The psychological pressure was intentional. I started second-guessing my own perceptions, wondering if I was imagining the subtle signs of intrusion. My sleep became fitful, interrupted by every small sound. I found myself checking locks obsessively, looking over my shoulder, questioning the authenticity of my own memories. One evening, I discovered a new cache of photos hidden inside my refrigerator's water filter. These were different, not just surveillance, but intimate moments I didn't remember being captured. Me changing clothes, me crying during a phone call, me in positions and states of undress that felt violating beyond description. Among them was a photo I couldn't explain. It showed me holding the original photos I'd found, but taken from an angle that should have been impossible. Someone had been in my apartment while I examined the evidence, photographing me, discovering their other photographs. The circular invasion of privacy felt deliberately designed to break down my sense of reality. I moved out that week, but the feeling of being watched followed me. Strange packages arrived at my new address containing nothing but black and white photographs of empty rooms. My old apartment, photographed from that same ceiling angle, now showing the next tenant, someone who had no idea what they'd inherited. I tried reporting everything to police, but without solid evidence of a crime, they could only file reports. The building manager had disappeared, leaving behind a forwarded address that led nowhere. The building's ownership had transferred to a shell company with no traceable contacts. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still being watched, if the person who collected those photographs identified me as their most interesting subject. Other times I wonder if I'm losing my grip on reality, if the psychological manipulation was so effective that I can no longer trust my own perceptions. The photographs I managed to keep are locked away now, but I still think about the faces in them, all those people who lived with the same violation I experienced, who tried to report something unthinkable and were dismissed as paranoid or unstable. Their expressions haunt me, the vulnerability of sleep captured and cataloged by someone who treated their privacy as a commodity. I never found out who was behind the photographs or if they're still operating in that building. The new tenant hasn't contacted me, which either means they haven't discovered the truth yet, or they've learned, like I did, that some violations are too disturbing to share, too isolating to prove, too invasive to escape completely. The couch is probably still there, waiting to reveal its secrets to the next unsuspecting resident. And somewhere, someone is still watching, still collecting, still adding to their archive of stolen intimacy. Crime 7, they were canvassing the neighborhood with flyers, some kind of break-in, a theft maybe. I took one without thinking. The sketch wasn't perfect, but it was close, too close. It showed my face, or at least a version of it. The jawline, the nose, it was undeniably me. I asked what the suspect had done. They said he entered homes without leaving a trace, left strange objects behind. No one was hurt, but people reported dreams, nightmares after the visits. I laughed it off. Then I found something under my pillow, a lock of someone else's hair, tied with string. The officer who handed me the flyer had tired eyes. She'd been walking door to door for hours, her voice hoarse from repeating the same questions. When I asked about the investigation, she leaned against my doorframe like she needed the support. The suspect had been active for months, she said, always the same pattern. Houses chosen seemingly at random, no forced entry, no signs of struggle, just items left behind that didn't belong. I studied the sketch again after she left. The artist had captured something unsettling, not just the features, but an expression I recognized. A hollow look I'd seen in my own mirror during sleepless nights. The eyes in the drawing seemed to follow me as I moved through my kitchen, holding the paper up to the light as if that would reveal some hidden truth. My neighbor across the street had been one of the victims. I'd watched the police cars arrive that morning, seen her standing on her porch in a bathrobe, gesturing wildly with her hands. She'd moved out within a week. The house had been empty ever since, the lawn growing wild, newspapers piling up. I'd wondered what could drive someone from their home so quickly. The hair under my pillow was blonde, fine like a child's. I held it up to the window, watching it catch the light. My own hair was dark, coarse. This belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who had been close enough to my bed to place it there while I slept. The string was red, tied in a neat bow like a gift. I called the police station. The officer who answered sounded bored until I mentioned the sketch. Her voice sharpened. She asked if I'd seen the suspect, if I'd noticed anything unusual. I described the hair the way I'd found it. She told me to save it in a plastic bag, that someone would come by to collect it, but no one ever came. The dreams started that night. I was walking through houses I'd never seen, rooms that felt familiar despite being foreign. My hands moved on their own, placing objects in drawers, under beds, behind picture frames. Small things, a marble, a broken watch, a child's toy. In the dreams, I could hear breathing that wasn't my own, see shadows that moved independently. I began checking my house each morning, looking for things that didn't belong. A pen I'd never owned appeared on my desk. A photograph of strangers sat on my nightstand. A key to an unknown lock hung from my doorknob. Each discovery felt like finding evidence of a crime I couldn't remember committing. The pattern of the break-ins became clearer as I read the police reports. 7 houses in 3 months, always suburban homes with families, always objects left behind that seemed personal, intimate. A mother's earring found in her daughter's room, a father's tie clip placed in the kitchen, wedding rings moved from nightstands to bathroom counters, nothing taken, only rearranged or added. I started driving past the victims' houses. Most were still occupied, but I could see the changes. New locks, security cameras, curtains drawn tight even during the day. One family had installed floodlights that turned their yard into a stage. I parked across the street and watched their shadows move behind closed blinds, wondering what they'd seen in their dreams. The officer who'd given me the flyer called to follow up. She asked if I'd remembered anything else, if I'd noticed any suspicious activity. Her questions felt pointed, like she was testing me. When I mentioned the objects appearing in my house, she went quiet. Then she asked if I'd been sleeping well, if I'd been anywhere I couldn't account for. Her tone suggested she already knew the answers. I found a journal in my handwriting that I didn't remember keeping. The entries described the houses, the families, the placement of objects. My own words detailed crimes I had no memory of committing. The handwriting was mine, but somehow different, looser, like it belonged to someone writing in their sleep. The final entry was dated the morning I'd received the flyer. The last victim had been a single mother with a young daughter. The object left behind was a child's drawing, a stick figure family with one figure scratched out. The woman had found it under her daughter's bed, along with a note in careful handwriting. "She looks just like you did." The mother had packed their things that same day. I drove to their old house and sat in the driveway. The windows were dark, the lawn overgrown. I could smell something sweet through my car window, not flowers, but something artificial like perfume or candy. When I got out to investigate, I found the front door slightly open. Inside, I could hear the faint sound of someone moving around, soft footsteps on carpet. The house was empty except for a few pieces of furniture the family had left behind. But in the daughter's room, I found more drawings scattered on the floor. All of them showed the same scratched-out figure, the same careful handwriting, all of them signed with my name. On the wall, someone had written a message in red marker, "You were always watching." I called the police station again, but the officer who'd been handling the case had been transferred. The new detective didn't seem interested in my story. He said the break-ins had stopped, that the case was being downgraded to inactive status. When I insisted on speaking to someone, he told me to come in for an interview. He gave me an address and a time, but when I arrived, the building was empty. The sketch is still on my refrigerator, held in place by a magnet I don't remember buying. Every morning I look at it while I drink coffee, studying the features that are almost but not quite my own. The eyes seem different now, more knowing. The expression has shifted from hollow to satisfied. Sometimes I catch myself tracing the lines with my finger, trying to understand what the artist saw. Last night I found another object under my pillow. This time it was a small key, warm to the touch like someone had been holding it. I don't know what it opens, but I suspect I'll find out soon. The dreams are getting stronger, more vivid. I can feel myself moving through other people's houses, leaving pieces of myself behind. The boundary between sleeping and waking has become thin, permeable. The neighborhood has been quiet since the investigation ended. No more police cars, no more flyers. But sometimes I see curtains twitch when I walk by, faces disappearing from windows. The families who stayed have adapted, learned to live with locks and cameras and the knowledge that someone had been inside their homes. They've accepted that some violations can't be undone, only endured. I've stopped trying to return the objects that appear in my house. They've become part of my routine, my landscape. The pen sits on my desk, the photograph watches from my nightstand. The key hangs from a chain around my neck, warm against my chest. They feel like mementos now, souvenirs from a life I can't quite remember living. The real question isn't whether I'm the person in the sketch. The question is whether it matters. The families have moved on or moved away. The case is closed. The dreams continue, but they feel less like intrusions now and more like invitations. I wake up with dirt under my fingernails and the taste of someone else's air in my lungs. I'm learning to stop fighting it. Tonight I'll probably dream of new houses, new families. I'll leave something behind, take something with me. The cycle will continue the way it always has. The sketch on my refrigerator will watch me prepare, its eyes following my movements with what might be approval or might be recognition. The difference doesn't seem important anymore. Crime 8 laundry day was routine. Load the clothes, read a book, wait. But one day the dryer spat out something I didn't recognize, a sweater, soft, expensive, definitely not mine. I figured it was a mix-up, until the next load came out entirely wrong, pants a size too big, socks I'd never seen, and wedged in the lint trap a receipt from a state I've never visited. Each load after that got weirder. A baby's onesie, a scarf with a blood stain. Eventually I found a Polaroid in the lint, someone folding clothes, smiling. Behind them was a wall, and on it, my missing calendar, pinned with a kitchen knife. The weight of that photograph in my hands felt different from any object I'd ever held. The paper was slightly warm, as if it had just been developed. I stared at the smiling face, a woman middle-aged, with kind eyes that seemed to look right through the camera lens. But it was what surrounded her that made my chest tight, my calendar. The one with the red circle around the date I'd moved into this apartment. The same calendar that had vanished from my kitchen wall weeks ago. I called the landlord that afternoon. His voice carried that practiced patience of someone who'd fielded too many tenant complaints. He assured me the laundry room was secure, that only residents had access. But when I pressed about the previous tenant, his tone shifted. There had been an incident, he said, nothing serious, just someone who'd stopped paying rent and disappeared without notice. The building manager lived 2 floors down. She invited me in for coffee, her small apartment cluttered with newspapers and cat photos. When I showed her the photograph, her cup rattled against the saucer. She recognized the woman immediately, the previous tenant from my unit. A quiet person who kept to herself, always doing laundry late at night. The manager remembered finding the apartment empty one morning, personal belongings scattered as if someone had left in a hurry. That evening I returned to the laundry room with a flashlight. The overhead bulb flickered unreliably, casting shifting shadows across the concrete walls. Behind the dryer I discovered a loose panel. My fingers found the edges and pulled. Inside was a small space, just large enough for someone to crawl through. The metal ductwork connected to something beyond the wall. I squeezed through the opening, following the cramped passage until it opened into another laundry room, identical to the one I'd just left, but this one belonged to the building next door. The dryers were connected through shared ventilation. Someone had been using this passage recently. The dust patterns on the floor showed clear footprints. The building next door had a different manager. an elderly man with suspicious eyes who claimed he'd never heard of any problems with the laundry facilities. But when I described the woman from the photograph, his expression changed. He'd seen her around the building, he admitted, always carrying garbage bags full of clothes. He'd assumed she was helping elderly residents with their washing. I spent the next few days watching the laundry room from my apartment window. On the third night, I saw a figure moving between the buildings. Someone small and quick, carrying what looked like laundry baskets. I grabbed my keys and followed. The passage behind the dryer was easier to navigate the second time. I emerged into the neighboring laundry room just as someone was stuffing clothes into one of the machines. But when I called out, the figure vanished through another door I hadn't noticed before. The door led to a basement storage area filled with boxes and abandoned furniture from previous tenants. Among the clutter, I found more clothes, piles of them, sorted by size and type. Some still had price tags, others were worn and faded. In the corner sat a makeshift desk with a notebook open to a page covered in addresses and apartment numbers. My address was there, so were dozens of others. Each entry included notes about the residents' schedules, their laundry habits when they typically left for work. The handwriting was careful and precise, like someone keeping inventory. I photographed every page before leaving. Back in my apartment, I spread the images across my kitchen table. The scope of what I was seeing slowly became clear. This wasn't random. Someone had been systematically monitoring multiple buildings, tracking residents' routines, collecting their belongings. The notebook included a section titled Disappeared Items. My calendar was listed there, along with clothing, jewelry, and personal documents from other apartments. Some entries were crossed out with dates next to them. Others remained unchecked. I called the police. The officer who took my report seemed skeptical until I showed him the photographs. He promised to investigate, but warned me that without clear evidence of theft or trespassing, there wasn't much they could do immediately. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the building made me tense. Around midnight I heard the familiar hum of the laundry room dryer starting up. I crept to my window and peered down. The laundry room was dark, but I could see movement inside. This time I didn't go alone. I called my neighbor, an off-duty security guard who agreed to come with me. We entered the laundry room together, flashlights ready. The dryer was running, but when we opened it, we found only my own clothes, the load I'd put in earlier that evening. But something was different. Tucked into the pocket of my jacket was another Polaroid. This one showed the interior of my apartment, taken from the angle of someone standing in my kitchen. The timestamp indicated it had been taken while I was in the laundry room investigating. The security guard immediately called the police. While we waited, we searched the passage behind the dryer more thoroughly. Hidden in the ductwork, we found a small camera, wireless, with a memory card full of footage from inside various apartments. The woman from the original photograph appeared in many of the recordings, but she wasn't alone. There were others, moving through apartments when residents were away, carefully selecting items to take. The police arrived and secured the scene. They found enough evidence to warrant a broader investigation across multiple buildings. But when they searched for the woman from the photographs, they discovered something troubling. According to official records, she died in a car accident 2 years earlier. The investigation revealed a network of people who'd been using her identity and accessing buildings through maintenance tunnels and shared utility spaces. They'd been collecting personal items not for their monetary value, but for reasons that remained unclear even after several arrests were made. I moved out of that apartment within the month, but sometimes when I'm doing laundry in my new place, I still check the lint trap carefully. I still examine every piece of clothing that comes out of the dryer, because I learned something that week that I can't unlearn. The boundaries we think protect our private spaces are more fragile than we imagine. The case officially closed when the main suspects were arrested, but questions remained. How long had this been going on? How many people were involved? And why had they been so methodical about documenting their activities? I kept the notebook photographs. Sometimes I study them, trying to understand the mind behind those careful observations. The handwriting looks familiar now, though I can't place where I might have seen it before. Maybe that's the most disturbing part of all, the possibility that someone I'd encountered in my daily life had been watching, waiting, planning. The police returned most of the stolen items to their owners, but some things were never recovered, including my calendar. Sometimes I wonder if it's still out there somewhere, pinned to someone else's wall, marking days that hold significance only they understand. Crime 9, it started with a crack in the glass, small and harmless. But as it grew, the reflection began to change. The furniture behind me looked older, dustier. The wallpaper had peeling stripes, unlike my smooth white walls. Then came the figure, a silhouette that appeared only in the reflection. It stood behind me, unmoving. Every time I turned, there was nothing. I tried replacing the mirror, but the new one showed the same room. I smashed it. The fragments still reflected the other place. Then last week, I saw myself in that version of the room, but I wasn't doing what I was doing. I was reaching for something under the bed, smiling. That smile haunted me for days. It wasn't mine. The expression was too knowing, too satisfied. I started avoiding mirrors altogether, but reflections found me in windows, in puddles, in the black screen of my phone. Always the same room, always that other version of myself. I decided to investigate. If this was some kind of breakdown, I needed to understand it. I began documenting everything. The room in the reflection had distinct features: dark wood furniture, floral wallpaper with vertical tiers, a bed with a wrought iron frame. The carpet was burgundy with a stain near the window. These details never changed, unlike real reflections that shift with movement and light. My research led me to old property records. I traced the history of my building, my apartment, the previous tenants. Nothing unusual surfaced. Standard lease agreements, normal turnover, no reported incidents. But then I found her name in the records from 2 years ago, the woman who lived here before me. She had terminated her lease abruptly, leaving behind furniture that matched what I saw in the reflection. I contacted the building manager. He remembered her well. She had been quiet, kept to herself, always paid rent on time. But she left suddenly, he said, claiming she needed to move back home to care for a sick relative. She left most of her belongings behind: the furniture, the wallpaper, even some personal items. The apartment had been completely renovated before I moved in. Something about his story felt rehearsed. The way he avoided eye contact when describing her departure. The pause before he mentioned the sick relative. I pressed for more details, but he became defensive, suggesting I focus on my own tenancy rather than dwelling on the past. That night I stood before my bathroom mirror, forcing myself to confront the reflection. The other room appeared as clearly as ever, but this time I noticed something new. On the nightstand in the reflected room sat a small jewelry box, ornate in silver. I had never seen it before in any of my visions. In the reflection, my other self walked toward it, opened it, and pulled out what looked like a key. I found myself mimicking the movements, reaching for a jewelry box that didn't exist in my real room. My hand touched empty air, but in the reflection, I watched myself hold the key up to the light. The satisfaction in that reflected smile deepened. The next morning, I returned to the building manager with a different approach. I told him I was interested in purchasing some of the furniture left behind by the previous tenant, thinking it might complement my decor. His face went pale. He claimed all items had been donated to charity, but when I asked which charity, he couldn't provide specifics. I began searching online for any trace of the previous tenant. Social media profiles, employment records, anything that might explain her sudden departure. What I found was disturbing in its absence. For someone who had lived in the digital age, she had remarkably little online presence. A few social media accounts that went dormant around the time she moved out. Employment records that ended abruptly with no forwarding information. But in one old post, buried deep in a social media thread, I found a photo. She was sitting in what looked like my apartment, but with the old furniture, the wallpaper, everything exactly as it appeared in my mirror reflections. She was smiling, holding up a small silver key, the same one I had seen in the reflection. The building manager was lying. The question was why. I decided to examine my apartment more thoroughly. If her belongings had truly been removed, there might still be traces. I started with the bedroom, running my hands along the walls where the floral wallpaper would have been. Under the fresh paint, I could feel the texture of old adhesive, the slight ridges where strips had been torn away hastily. In the corner near the window, I found something the renovators had missed, a small hole in the wall about the size of a key. It had been painted over but not filled. When I inserted a thin object into the hole, I heard a soft click. A section of the wall shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. Inside was a space barely large enough for a shoebox, and there was a shoebox, old, water-damaged, tied with string. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, and at the bottom, a small silver key that matched the one in the reflection. The photographs showed the previous tenant in various poses around the apartment, but as I flipped through them, her expression changed from happiness to concern to what looked like fear. In the final photos, she appeared to be documenting something, pointing at walls, at the floor, at the ceiling. One document was a handwritten note. They keep coming back, the sounds at night. Someone has been in here while I was out. Things moved, food missing. The spare key is gone. I don't know who to trust. The building manager says no one else has access, but he's lying. I can tell by how he won't look at me anymore. Another note in shakier handwriting. Found the camera, tiny thing hidden behind the mirror. How long have they been watching me? I've been looking for others but can't find them. Moving out tomorrow, can't stay here. Can't report this because I don't know who's involved. The final note was just a date and an address. The date was from 2 years ago, the day after she was supposed to have moved out according to the building manager. The address was unfamiliar. I looked up the address. It was a storage facility across town. Using the key from the hidden box, I drove there and found the corresponding unit. Inside were more of her belongings, but also something else. A manila folder containing photographs of the building, floor plans, and what appeared to be surveillance footage screenshots. The images showed multiple people entering and leaving apartments, including mine, at various times. Some I recognized as current tenants, others were strangers, but one figure appeared repeatedly in photos taken from my apartment. The building manager, sometimes alone, sometimes with others I didn't recognize. At the bottom of the folder was a business card for a private investigator with a note attached. If something happens to me, give this to them. They know about the building. I called the number. The investigator remembered her case well. She had hired him to document what she believed was illegal surveillance and possible break-ins in the building. He had gathered evidence, but before he could present it to authorities, she disappeared. Not moved away, he emphasized, disappeared. Her family had filed a missing person report, but the investigation stalled when the building manager provided documentation of her lease termination and claimed she had moved out voluntarily. The investigator still had copies of his findings. The building had been used as a front for various illegal activities, with certain apartments serving as observation points for monitoring tenants' activities. The previous tenant had unknowingly moved into one of these units, and when she discovered the surveillance equipment, she became a liability. But here's what made my blood run cold. According to his investigation, the surveillance was still active. The people who had been watching her were now watching me. I returned to my apartment with this knowledge, seeing everything differently. The perfectly timed maintenance visits, the building manager's excessive interest in my schedule, the neighbors who never seemed to be around when I was. I examined every inch of my newly renovated space and found them. Tiny cameras, nearly invisible, positioned behind the new fixtures. The mirror reflections hadn't been hallucinations or psychological breaks. They had been recordings, somehow projected through modified mirrors to show me the previous tenant's room, her movements, her discovery of the truth. Someone had been trying to communicate with me, to warn me, using the only method available. In the bathroom mirror that night, I saw her one final time. Not the satisfied smile I had misinterpreted, but a desperate expression of someone trying to convey a message. She was pointing at the jewelry box, then at the wall, then at the door. She had been trying to show me where she had hidden the evidence and how to escape. I packed immediately, taking only essential items and the evidence I had found. But as I reached for the door, I heard footsteps in the hallway, stopping just outside my apartment. Through the peephole, I saw the building manager with two other men, one of whom I recognized from the surveillance photos. They knew I had discovered the truth. I climbed out through the fire escape, the same route she must have planned to use. But unlike her, I had the advantage of her evidence and her warning. I made it to the private investigator's office, where we immediately contacted law enforcement with everything we had gathered. The investigation that followed revealed a network of illegal surveillance operations targeting multiple buildings across the city, but the previous tenant was never found. The official report concluded that she had likely been relocated by the criminal organization when she became a threat to their operation. Sometimes I still catch glimpses of that other room in reflections, always empty now, waiting. The mirror had shown me the truth, but not the complete truth. I saved myself, but I couldn't save her. She had tried to warn me from wherever they had taken her, using the only connection she could maintain to the place she had called home. The building manager was arrested, along with several associates, but the organization was larger than anyone had suspected, and most of its members remained at large. I live elsewhere now, in a place with no shared walls and no building management company. But I still check reflections carefully, wondering if somewhere, someone else is trying to send a warning that only I might understand. The key I found now sits on my nightstand, a reminder that some disappearances are not voluntary departures but carefully orchestrated erasures, and that sometimes the only trace left behind is a reflection of the truth, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond the surface and see what others would prefer to keep hidden. Story 10: The Enigma of the Whispering House. She had a desire to freshen up the nursery before the little one's arrival. The walls wore a faded blue hue, a color that harbored years of untold tales within its depths. As she carefully applied the first coat of white paint, a hidden surprise emerged from beneath faint letters, initially indiscernible, gradually sharpening into focus. A message etched beneath the surface. "Don't let it hear you," her breath hitched. Stepping back, her eyes caught sight of it, tiny handprints imprinted in the wet paint, positioned too high on the wall for a child's reach. This revelation within the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the genesis of what investigators would later dub the Whispering House case. The young couple had recently acquired the Victorian-style dwelling for a suspiciously low price, unaware of the dark secrets it held. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the doorstep, her notebook at the ready. A woman, her swollen belly evident under paint-stained overalls, greeted her. Weariness clung to her, evident in the circles beneath her eyes. Sleep had eluded her for nights on end. The detective observed the woman's trembling hands as she recounted the unsettling discovery of the hidden message and handprints. Detailing the sudden departure of the previous owners, the woman disclosed that they had left under the cover of night, with no moving truck in sight, only the essentials packed hastily into their car. Detective Klein traversed the corridors of the historic abode, the aged floorboards creaking beneath her feet. Upon entering the nursery, she scrutinized the partially painted wall, the cryptic message still visible where the paint job had been abruptly halted. Adjacent to it, 5 small handprints stood out against the fresh paint, positioned at the level of an adult's shoulders. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property records. The house had changed ownership 8 times in 3 decades, a remarkably high turnover rate. What was more disconcerting were the reports of child welfare issues filed for 3 of those families. Children had spoken of whispers emanating from the walls and a presence watching them in their slumber. The detective delved deeper, unearthing construction records and historical accounts. The house had once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who, childless herself, had operated a small orphanage on the premises during the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings alluded to 5 children who had vanished from her care. Authorities at the time presumed they had run away, a common fate for orphans in that era. When Eleanor passed away, renovation workers made a chilling discovery, a sealed room concealed behind the nursery wall. Inside lay the possessions of children, tiny shoes, toys, and garments, but no traces of their remains. The investigation took a grim turn as Detective Klein pried into the experiences of former residents. Each family with children recounted peculiar incidents, toys rearranged overnight, childish laughter echoing through empty halls, and crayon drawings materializing on walls. Most dismissed these occurrences as figments of imagination until the eerie writing surfaced. The message varied slightly in each account. Don't let them find you. Don't make a sound. Don't let it hear you. The penmanship remained consistent, surfacing each time the nursery was repainted. A forensic linguist scrutinized photographs of the writing and confirmed its match with samples from Eleanor Blackwood's journals. More unsettling were the handprints uniform in size and placement over the decades, despite different children inhabiting the home. The detective persuaded the current owners to permit ground-penetrating radar scans in the basement. Anomalies in the readings indicated 5 distinct shapes beneath the concrete floor, each resembling a child's size. Beneath the shattered concrete, a harrowing truth awaited discovery. 5 sets of small remains, arranged in a circle, bore evidence that these children had perished during Eleanor's tenure in the house. Each child still wore a pendant engraved with their name, the 5 orphans who had ostensibly fled. The detective ordered the nursery to be doused in luminol. In the dimness, handprints glowed on every wall, concealed beneath layers of paint, invisible to the naked eye. Countless handprints at varying elevations, as if the children had endeavored to escape their confines. Eleanor's journals, salvaged from county archives, unveiled her perverse beliefs. She held the conviction that orphaned children possessed a unique spiritual energy. By confining them in the hidden chamber, she aspired to siphon their life force to prolong her own existence. Desperate, the children had etched their warnings into the wall with their nails and bits of metal, hoping future occupants would uncover their tragic fate. The case concluded with the dignified burial of the 5 victims. Their names were finally inscribed not as runaways, but as victims of foul play. The residence lay vacant thereafter, the expectant couple steadfastly refusing to set foot in it again. Detective Klein penned her final report, enclosing snapshots of the luminol-revealed handprints and the concealed message. She acknowledged that while justice had been meted out for the initial victims, an inexplicable presence lingered within the house, reaching out through layers of paint and time. The nursery walls were raised during the restoration process, yet workers attested to hearing children's whispers emanating from the debris. None dared to return once their shift concluded. Eventually condemned, the house became another cold case file in the archives, a tangible resolution but spiritual enigmas left unanswered. The detective retained a solitary photograph from the case, a haunting image of 5 luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a poignant reminder that certain atrocities leave indelible imprints that no amount of fresh paint can mask. Story 11, the aged envelope with its yellowed corners, bore a fresh stamp, as if time had stood still since it was last sealed. With cautious hands, the detective unfolded its contents, a lone sheet of paper, bearing a message in a hurried, disjointed font. "I am sorry for what I did." A faint dampness lingered on the paper, carrying the unmistakable scent of iron. It was then that a reddish smear caught their attention along the lower edge, a grim revelation that it was not mere ink staining the page. Detective Sarah Morgan, with practiced precision, secured the letter in an evidence bag, her gloved fingers betraying no hint of the unease that crept within her. The forensics team's findings confirmed her suspicions the reddish stain was human blood, a chilling echo of an unsolved homicide case that had cast a long shadow over the department. The victim, Rebecca Warren, a young journalist, had been discovered in her apartment, her life cut short by multiple stab wounds. Her laptop gone, her notes strewn across the floor in disarray, hinting that her assailant may have sought to silence her in connection to an investigative piece she was pursuing. Despite tireless efforts, countless interviews, endless hours of investigation, the case had grown cold, a puzzle with missing pieces that refused to fit. And now this cryptic letter had found its way to the homicide division, bearing a message shrouded in enigma. The paper and envelope yielded scant fingerprints, only faint smudges suggesting the sender's cautious touch. Yet the postmark offered a slender thread of hope, a trail to follow in the labyrinth of unanswered questions. Gathering her team in the dimly lit briefing room, Detective Morgan surveyed the array of crime scene photos and lights that had led them in circles. Pinning the letter at the heart of their investigation board, she voiced the realization that permeated the room: this changes everything. Our culprit carries the burden of remorse. But Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner in this haunting case, offered a sobering counterpoint. Or perhaps it is a facade, a mask of contrition to deceive us. The blood a macabre touch to unsettle our resolve. As the forensics team delved into the typewriter's antiquated origins, tracing its unique patterns to a bygone model, rare yet not beyond reach, the hunt for the sender gained momentum. Delving into Rebecca's world, the team unearthed fragments of her life, a portrait of a relentless journalist dedicated to uncovering the veils of corruption. Her latest inquiry had entangled her in the affairs of a wealthy family with ties to local politics, a web of power dynamics and hidden agendas. In their pursuit of truth, the detectives turned to Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, seeking answers veiled in shadows. His demeanor, once stoic, now betrayed flickers of unease, subtle tremors beneath the surface as he confessed. Rebecca feared she was being followed. I dismissed it as paranoia, a byproduct of her investigations. I should have listened. As the tendrils of the investigation tightened, a second letter materialized, bearing the same typewritten message, the same unsettling hue of blood. This time the words delved deeper into the darkness. She uncovered too much about the family, about the inheritance, about the patriarch's demise. It was never meant to escalate to this extent. The trail led the detectives to the mansion of the deceased patriarch, where suspicions intertwined with the whispers of betrayal. The eldest son, Richard, harbored a trove of antiques, including vintage typewriters that echoed the clandestine messages. His explanations rang hollow, rehearsed a veneer that masked deeper truths. A breakthrough surfaced with the discovery of microscopic fibers on the envelopes, linking them to custom stationery exclusively owned by the family's youngest daughter, Eleanor. In her revelations, a tangled web unfurled a narrative of deceit and collusion. A search of Richard's domain unveiled a hidden chamber, a shrine to obsession adorned with relics of Rebecca's demise. The final revelation emerged in the shadows of complicity, as bank records unveiled a sinister pact between Richard and Michael, a pact sealed in blood and betrayal. Confronted with the weight of his actions, Michael's facade crumbled, revealing a tale of secrets whispered in darkness. And as Eleanor stepped forward, bearing a damning recording that etched the truth in stone, the threads of deception unraveled, weaving a tapestry of guilt and retribution. Richard's voice, clear and damning, echoed in the courtroom, sealing his fate with each syllable. Silence her forever. In the hushed confines of the trial, truth stood unwavering against the tides of deceit. Richard, defiant in his denial, found his defenses crumbling beneath the weight of evidence, an avalanche of guilt that no alibi could withstand. And as justice prevailed, marking the end of a harrowing chapter, Detective Morgan found herself standing before Rebecca's grieving parents, a silent promise of closure in her eyes. The blood-stained letters, relics of a dark saga, remained enshrined in evidence storage, a testament to the frailty of the perfect crime, the echoes of remorse that linger in the shadows of the night. The tale of Rebecca Warren, a haunting parable etched in the annals of detective lore, whispered of the unseen forces that bind the fates of the guilty and the innocent. For in the quiet hum of an old typewriter, in the weight of a confession stained with blood, lies the truth that even the darkest secrets cast shadows that cannot be erased. And in the realm of justice, where the scales weigh the sins of the past, redemption finds its voice in the echoes of a letter penned in remorse. Story 12. It was a pocket dial, a mere whisper of static and muffled echoes that almost went unnoticed by the operator. But then a voice sliced through the noise like a blade in the darkness. A woman's voice, barely audible, urgently whispered, "He's here." He, and then an eerie silence descended, swallowing her words whole. The number traced back to an empty house, a once vibrant abode left deserted for years. No signs of forced entry, no disruptions in the stillness of the air. Yet in the kitchen, blanketed with layers of dust, the phone rested on the counter, its screen softly glowing. The call had been made mere moments before. Detective Morgan Reed found herself pressing the playback button repeatedly, drawn to the haunting whisper that lingered in the air, desperate, filled with fear, and utterly inexplicable. The dwelling had once belonged to the Sullivan family, who had fled after a raging inferno devoured most of the West Wing. No soul had inhabited the space since. The caretaker swore by his monthly visits, adamant that no intruder had trespassed in years. "Can we trace the number?" Morgan inquired of her partner, Detective Walsh. The reply came swiftly. "Registered to Catherine Sullivan, the daughter. She passed away in a car accident 3 years ago." As Morgan gazed at the phone nestled in an evidence bag, the enigma of the case deepened. A deceased woman's phone emanating calls from a forsaken house. The dust on the counter bore only the faintest disturbance where the phone perched, as though it had materialized out of thin air. The forensics team scoured for clues but unearthed naught. No fingerprints adorned the device save for elusive smudges that defied identification. No footprints marred the path to or from the dwelling. The doors remained bolted, the windows sealed shut. The recording became the nucleus of their inquiry, those 11 seconds of static, of breaths caught in the wind, and 5 haunting words. Voice analysis confirmed a chilling revelation. The voice matched Catherine Sullivan's with a staggering 98% certainty, derived from ancient recordings. The timestamp pinpointed the call at the precise moment of Catherine's demise 3 years past, down to the very minute. Morgan and Walsh delved into the lives intertwined with Catherine's. Her father, now remarried, appeared genuinely perplexed. Her mother, a solitary figure in a modest apartment, crumbled upon hearing the recording. "That's my Katie," she murmured. "She sounds so afraid." Catherine's former beau at the time of her passing, Mark Jennings, provided an alibi for the night of the call, engaged in a hospital night shift, corroborated by numerous witnesses and surveillance footage. Furthermore, the house had stood barren. The call should never have transpired, yet it had. The investigation hit an impasse until a call from Catherine's mother cracked the case wide open. "I stumbled upon something in her belongings," she quivered. "Katie kept a diary, the final entry. You must see it." Within the journal lay meticulous entries chronicling Catherine's liaison with Mark. The initial adoration, tarnished by possessiveness, isolation, and ultimately dread. The last passage read, "He discovered my plans to depart. His fury knows no bounds. If harm befalls me, it shall not be by chance." Confronting Mark anew, Morgan observed his demeanor falter under the weight of the journal's accusations. "You believe I harmed Katie based on her words. That's no proof," he retorted. "The incident report places you at the scene before emergency services," Morgan pointed out, "prior to their arrival. Concern gripped me when she failed to appear. I went in search of her," he asserted. "Her vehicle met its end on a secluded route. How did you discern her location?" Morgan probed. His countenance drained of color. "I've explained I was concerned." Investigators revisited the crash site. Though the vehicle had been long removed, Morgan sanctioned ground-penetrating radar surveillance. The scan unveiled a chilling secret buried 20 feet from the crash site, Catherine's actual phone. The device unearthed in the dwelling was merely a backup, safeguarded at her parents' residence. Analysis of the buried phone unveiled erased texts exchanged between Catherine and her sister on the fatal night. "Mark learned of my departure. He tails me in his car. And later, he coerces me off the road." Upon reevaluation of Catherine's autopsy images, the medical examiner noted injuries incongruous with a mere accident. Defensive wounds etched on her hands, bruises hinting at asphyxiation. When the authorities arrived to apprehend Mark, an unsettling void greeted them. His abode harbored a shrine dedicated to Catherine, photographs, pilfered mementos, and clippings chronicling her demise. Amid his possessions lay audio editing software and scripts detailing the fabrication of the phantom call, constructed by splicing Catherine's voice from archived recordings. The call had been his macabre game, a ploy to bewilder investigators and torment Catherine's mourning kin. The inquiry broadened to encompass other instances where Mark had been involved as an emergency responder. Two more deaths of young women shrouded in suspicion surfaced, both dismissed as accidents. Both women had shared ties with Mark. 6 days into the manhunt, officers espied Mark's vehicle stationed outside the Sullivan abode. Inside, he sat in the kitchen, fixated on a phone identical to Catherine's. Subdued, he offered no resistance upon arrest. "She refused to be silenced," he uttered to Morgan during interrogation. "Even after I silenced her physically, she persisted, accusing me. I needed all to hear her voice to believe she lingered somewhere beyond. A specter cannot testify against me." The jury rendered their verdict in scant hours, pronouncing Mark guilty of premeditated murder. As the echoes of judgment reverberated, Catherine's mother clutched the journal to her heart. Justice had dawned not through supernatural means, but through the voice Catherine had bequeathed in her written confessions, her fears etched in ink, her final pleas for deliverance. The phone from the forsaken dwelling now resides in the evidence vault. At times, officers swear they hear its phantom chime, though its power source had been severed long ago. Catherine's narrative endures, not as a spectral legend, but as a testament to the resilience of victims, their whispers echoing through the ages even when their voices are stilled. Story 13. The apartment lay dormant for months, its silence a shroud over the new tenants who ventured inside with cautious curiosity. Their expectations were minimal, perhaps a layer of dust, a forgotten piece of furniture. Yet one door stood firm against their efforts, a closet locked tight from within. With a forceful push, the landlord revealed its secrets, anticipating only old coats or discarded items. But what greeted them was a sight that sent shivers down their spines. The walls bore witness to a haunting tale, etched with deep, jagged scratches that spoke of desperation and confinement. And nestled in the corner, an ancient flip phone lay dormant, its screen illuminated by a single unread message that whispered of ominous knowledge. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned in the ways of darkness, felt a chill crawl up her spine as she surveyed the scene before her. It wasn't the presence of blood or violence that unnerved her, but rather the silent screams of those scratch marks a testament to someone's struggle for freedom. "Call forensics immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured each haunting detail through his lens, and gather all records of the previous tenants. The cryptic message on the phone simply stated, "I know what you did." The landlord, a jittery figure with perpetually damp hands, shared that the previous tenant had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid rent. A quiet young woman kept to herself, disappeared about 6 months back, he muttered, his gaze darting everywhere except towards the closet. No trouble at all. Forensic analysis unveiled a chilling revelation: traces of blood intertwined with the scratches on the walls, most belonging to a single individual. Emma Caldwell, a 28-year-old woman, reported missing after her abrupt disappearance. However, 2 DNA samples puzzled the investigators, one unidentified, the other belonging to a man supposedly deceased for 2 years. "This is impossible," Shaw murmured, her gaze fixed on the perplexing findings. Emma's apartment painted a portrait of interrupted existence: unopened mail, a lone coffee mug in the sink, a neatly arranged bed that hadn't been slept in for months. Her phone records whispered of a sudden silence, a void left by the absence of her regular calls to her sister. The unknown number that had peppered her call log in the days leading up to her vanishing added another layer of mystery. As Officer Reed relayed Emma's mention of a mysterious, intense boyfriend, Shaw delved deeper into the shadows that enveloped the case. Surveillance footage captured a shadowy figure, concealed under a baseball cap, trailing Emma into her building one fateful night, setting the stage for a twisted tale to unravel. The pieces began to align when partial fingerprints belonging to the supposedly deceased Derek Mercer were discovered on the closet's inner doorknob. He staged his death, Shaw concluded, her mind racing to uncover the enigmatic connection between Mercer and Emma. The unidentified DNA sample led them down a dark path, intertwining Emma's fate with another missing woman, Lynette Porter, who had vanished without a trace 3 years prior. Shaw traced the threads of fate, connecting the dots that led to a remote property owned by Mercer's kin, a place shrouded in secrecy and suffering. Behind the heavy basement doors, they found Lynette alive, but a mere shadow of her former self, trapped in a hellish existence mirroring Emma's confinement. "He forced me to watch," she whispered, haunted eyes staring into the void, "to learn the price of defiance." The evidence stacked against Mercer unveiled a twisted obsession with dominance, a thirst for power that thrived in the shadows. Journals chronicling his descent into madness, photographs of his victims, and chilling video recordings of Emma's final moments painted a portrait of a malevolent force lurking in plain sight. The manhunt for Derek Mercer spanned across boundaries, his presence a specter haunting the minds of those tasked with bringing him to justice. As forensic psychologists delved into the depths of his depravity, a chilling truth emerged: Mercer's thirst for control transcended mere violence. It sought to shatter the very essence of hope and freedom. When Mercer was finally apprehended at a bus terminal, a new identity clutched in his hands. The weight of his crimes bore down upon him like a suffocating cloak. In his possession, a roll of duct tape, a gleaming hunting knife, and a newspaper clipping chronicling Emma's disappearance whispered of his malevolent designs. During interrogation, Mercer exuded a calm demeanor, a facade that barely masked the darkness within. She sent that message to herself, he claimed, a twisted smile playing on his lips. She craved the attention, the rescue she felt she deserved. The trial laid bare the intricacies of Mercer's elaborate charade, his staged demise a mere chapter in a saga of terror and manipulation. Emma's fate remained a mystery, her final moments lost to the confines of that suffocating closet, her silent screams echoing through the hollows of time. The jury's verdict rang out like a clarion call of justice, condemning Mercer to a life behind bars, a sentence devoid of redemption or reprieve. As the courtroom reverberated with the weight of his crimes, Lynette Porter stepped forward, her voice a beacon of resilience in the face of darkness. "He locked us in the shadows of his mind, but I choose the light," she declared, her gaze unwavering as she faced her tormentor. As Mercer's fate was sealed, Detective Shaw carried with her a solemn reminder of the horrors that lurked in the quietest corners, a reminder etched in the scratches of a closet door, a testament to the strength that endures in the face of unspeakable evil. Story 14. The arrival of Michael and Sarah Klein at the Victorian-era home was met with an air of mystery that lingered like a whisper in the wind. The house, with its ornate woodwork and high ceilings, seemed to hold secrets within its walls, secrets that beckoned to be unveiled. It all began innocently enough, with a simple water stain in the master bedroom. A yellowish discoloration on the floral wallpaper caught Sarah's eye, sparking a chain of events that would unravel the hidden history of the house. As they peeled back the layers of wallpaper, they uncovered more than just outdated patterns. Beneath the surface lay a name, Alina Winters, scrawled in dark ink, repeated obsessively as if etched by a restless soul seeking to be heard. Who was Alina Winters, and why was her name haunting the walls of their new home? Curiosity turned into obsession as Michael and Sarah delved into the past, unraveling a tale of a missing woman from decades ago. Alina Winters, a young woman with dark hair and distinctive eyes, bore an uncanny resemblance to the woman who had sold them the house, Margaret Cavendish. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, painting a portrait of a disturbed mind seeking refuge in assumed identities. Rebecca Eldridge, a psychiatric patient with dissociative identity disorder, had taken on the persona of Alina Winters after her disappearance, weaving a complex web of deceit and delusion. The walls of the house became a canvas for Rebecca's fractured psyche, a desperate attempt to cling to reality amidst a sea of fabricated personalities. The discovery of hidden spaces and false identities only deepened the mystery, leading to a chilling revelation that shook the very foundation of their reality. As forensic teams unearthed long-buried secrets from the backyard, the truth emerged in all its grim clarity. Alina Winters, long presumed missing, was found beneath the garden, a victim of jealousy and betrayal at the hands of Rebecca Eldridge in her guise as Margaret Cavendish. The names on the wall, once a cryptic enigma, now stood as a testament to a tragedy that had unfolded within those very walls. Justice, though delayed, finally found its way to Alina's family, bringing closure to a chapter that had long been shrouded in darkness. For Michael and Sarah, their dream home had transformed into a place of infamy, a relic of a haunting tale that would forever echo through the corridors of time. The house where the walls themselves whispered of secrets long buried, a reminder that sometimes the past refuses to stay silent. And as the night fell, casting a shroud of tranquility over the once turbulent abode, the whispers of the past faded into the gentle hum of the night, lulling all who listened into a peaceful slumber. Story 15. The new homeowners found it peculiar how the old intercom system crackled late at night, a relic of the past, forgotten but still present. One night the husband pressed the button out of curiosity, and a whisper crackled through the speaker, asking, "Why did you come back?" Startled, he stepped back, hands trembling. His wife, standing behind him, denied ever uttering those words. The Victorian manor stood quietly among ancient oak trees, its exterior showing signs of age while concealing a modern interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker had acquired the property at a surprisingly affordable price, despite the real estate agent's unease during the initial tour. The intercom system, a vintage feature linking all rooms, had appealed to the history-loving couple. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, the gravel crunching beneath her unmarked vehicle's tires. The call had mentioned a possible break-in, but there seemed to be more to the story, hinted by the dispatcher's tone. Daniel Parker, pale in the dim light, welcomed her at the door and led her through the grand foyer. It all began with the intercom, he explained, his voice hushed. First there was static, then whispers, and eventually full sentences. My wife thought I was imagining it until she heard it too. In the living room, Meredith sat tense on an antique sofa, gripping a mug that remained untouched. Without preamble, she revealed, "We found something hidden behind the wall." Daniel wanted to expand the kitchen pantry, and when he removed the drywall, her voice trailed off. Behind the wall lay a small leather-bound journal wrapped in deteriorating plastic. Detective Reeves, wearing gloves, delicately opened its fragile pages. The elegant yet frantic handwriting belonged to Alina, the previous owner. Her entries unveiled her suspicion that her husband Vincent intended to harm her. The last entry is 30 years old, Daniel elaborated. After that, silence. The previous owners mentioned they bought it from an elderly man who relocated to a retirement community. Further investigation revealed that Vincent and Alina Blackwood had indeed lived in the house. Records showed Vincent sold the property not long after Alina supposedly left him, without any record of divorce or change of address for her. A team was assembled to scrutinize the property thoroughly. Ground-penetrating radar unveiled anomalies beneath the garden shed's concrete foundation. As the investigators broke through the aged concrete, they uncovered human remains. Forensic analysis identified the skeleton as a woman in her 40s, showing signs of head trauma. Among the remains, a gold wedding band bore the inscription, "To Alina, my eternal love." The evidence quickly mounted against Vincent Blackwood, now elderly and residing in a care facility. When confronted, his calm response sent shivers down Detective Reeves' spine. "She wouldn't stop talking," he said. "Always through that intercom, checking on me, questioning me. I disconnected it, but she rewired it herself, wanting to reach me wherever I was in the house. I just wanted peace." Vincent confessed to meticulously fabricating Alina's disappearance, even sending forged postcards from different locations. He had lived in the house for years, walking over the spot where his wife lay buried. At the trial, he pleaded guilty to murder. The judge acknowledged the premeditated nature of the crime and the decades of deceit that followed. Daniel and Meredith eventually sold the house, unable to stay after uncovering its dark past. Before departing, they held a memorial for Alina in the restored garden. The intercom system was removed by the new owners during renovations, with workers hearing whispers and static, attributing it to their tools' interference. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file before it was archived. As she closed the folder, she pondered how the house had transcended time to expose its secret. Justice had caught up with Vincent, thanks to Alina finding a way to make her voice heard. The local law enforcement dubbed the case the house that answered back. Occasionally, Detective Reeves would drive by the property on her way home. She never stopped, but she would slow down, window cracked open to catch any whispers carried by the breeze. Story 16. It arrived in the mailbox, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. A solitary brass key, weathered with age. The homeowner didn't recognize it, yet something about it stirred a sense of déjà vu within her. As she tried it in every lock she possessed, not a single one yielded. It did not belong to her. But when she placed it on the coffee table, the ancient grandfather clock in the hallway emitted a solitary, eerie chime despite its long-standing silence. Sarah Miller, perplexed by the inexplicable event, promptly informed the authorities upon discovering the mysterious key. What seemed like a mere oddity swiftly unfolded into one of the most unsettling criminal inquiries the tranquil suburban neighborhood had ever encountered. The responding officer initially brushed off her worries. A key in the mail, likely a mistake, he proposed. However, Sarah could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later play a pivotal role in a far-reaching investigation. Detective Robert Harmon received the case file during the morning briefing. A seasoned investigator from the Special Victims Unit, he possessed an intuition for cases destined to transcend their seemingly innocuous origins. The brass key sat on his desk, unassuming yet disquieting. Background checks indicated Sarah had no criminal record. A retired high school English teacher, widowed, with 2 adult children residing across the country. Her financial records, phone logs, and social media revealed nothing suspicious. She appeared precisely as she professed an unwitting recipient of something peculiar. The forensic team uncovered no fingerprints on the key besides Sarah's. The envelope divulged nothing save for a generic postmark from the regional distribution center. No DNA, no trace evidence. The key, a standard Schlage model, well worn and aged at least several years. The breakthrough materialized unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's distinctive bidding pattern through the department database. A cold case from 7 years prior documented an identical key pattern associated with a storage unit where investigators had uncovered blood-stained carpet, cutting tools, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had stalled due to insufficient evidence to identify a suspect. Harmon delved into the dusty case files. The detective who had led the investigation had retired. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash. Surveillance footage had long been erased. The collected evidence had yielded partial DNA samples, yet no matches in any criminal database. The recovered photographs depicted 5 different women, all appearing unconscious. Merely 3 had been identified during the initial investigation, all reported missing but never located. Their cases lingered open, deemed suspected homicides without bodies. Sarah Miller recognized none of the women in the photographs. Her anxiety heightened as the investigation progressed, prompting her to fortify her home with new locks and a security system. The enigma persisted. Why had someone sent her this key? Harmon ordered a fresh analysis of the original evidence utilizing modern techniques. The partial DNA sample was expanded and cross-referenced through genealogical databases, revealing a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the suspect. Tracing back through family trees, investigators honed in on Harold Jenkins, who had resided 2 streets away from Sarah until relocating approximately 6 years ago. His current whereabouts remained unknown. Further digging disclosed that Jenkins had been a substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah taught, though their documented interactions were minimal. His employment records unveiled sporadic work history, prolonged unexplained absences, and frequent moves. Examination of his former residence uncovered nothing out of the ordinary. Neighbors described him as unassuming, quiet, someone who kept to himself, a common portrayal that often follows revelations about predators camouflaged in plain sight. The burning question lingered: why dispatch the key now? Why to Sarah Miller? Harmon speculated it could be a trophy, a caution, or perhaps a sinister invitation. The manhunt for Jenkins intensified. His driver's license had not been renewed, no credit card activity, no tax filings. The digital traces individuals typically leave behind were conspicuously absent, hinting at a deliberate effort to remain untraceable. The true horror of the case unfurled when authorities probed a small cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Beneath the aged wooden floorboards, investigators stumbled upon a concealed chamber accessible solely through a trapdoor. Inside, meticulously arranged shelves housed numerous identical brass keys, each inscribed with a name and date on a small attached tag. 5 keys corresponded to the women in the photographs. The remaining keys, 27 in total, hinted at a chilling implication of additional victims previously unknown to law enforcement. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams unearthed human remains. The excavation persisted for weeks as investigators uncovered multiple bodies in various stages of decay. Sarah received continuous protection as the manhunt for Jenkins expanded nationwide. Behavioral analysts postulated that the key symbolized a twisted invitation, Jenkins selecting Sarah as someone to acknowledge his work. The media dubbed him the Keymaster, a moniker that swiftly spread across national headlines. Fear permeated the community as residents grappled with how such horror could lurk among them undetected. Detection dogs trailed a scent from the cabin into the surrounding wilderness. Search parties scoured dense forested areas. Thermal imaging drones surveyed terrain too treacherous for ground teams. The manhunt burgeoned into one of the most extensive in regional history. A wildlife photographer trekking through remote woods captured an image of an individual resembling Jenkins. The blurry photograph depicted a bearded man with hollow eyes carrying a backpack, venturing further into the wilderness. Authorities zeroed in on the area, establishing a perimeter. Tactical units maneuvered through challenging terrain, while psychological profilers anticipated that Jenkins would not surrender and might have prepared with hidden supplies and escape routes. The final confrontation unfolded when a patrol officer encountered Jenkins attempting to traverse a river. Rather than capitulate, Jenkins retreated to higher ground, barricading himself in an abandoned fire observation tower. Negotiators endeavored to establish communication for hours with no response. When tactical teams breached the tower, they discovered Jenkins lifeless from a self-inflicted wound. Beside his body lay a journal chronicling detailed accounts of his crimes, along with a single brass key identical to the one Sarah had received. Within a waterproof container, investigators unearthed additional evidence, including photographs, maps marking burial sites, and personal effects pilfered from victims, a meticulously preserved chronicle of atrocities spanning nearly a decade. The journal's final entry was addressed to Sarah directly. "You never noticed me, but I noticed everything about you. The key opens nothing because what I wanted to give you cannot be unlocked with metal, only with recognition. Now everyone will remember my name." The subsequent investigation identified 32 victims in total. Families who had agonized for years over missing loved ones finally obtained closure, albeit burdened with the unbearable truth of confirmed tragedy. Sarah never returned to her residence, unable to come to terms with the horror that had grazed so near to her ordinary life. The grandfather clock that had mysteriously chimed was scrutinized and found to contain a discreet wireless receiver Jenkins had been observing, awaiting the moment she received his gift. The case endures as one of the most harrowing illustrations of predatory behavior concealed beneath a facade of normalcy. Psychological researchers persist in scrutinizing Jenkins' writings, endeavoring to discern insights to identify similar perpetrators before they strike. And somewhere in an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys rests in silent testimony to lives truncated, each key unlocking nothing, yet revealing a devastating truth about the darkness that occasionally lurks behind unassuming exteriors. Story 17, the ancient library faced its final moments as the wrecking crew prepared to bring it down. Among the workers, a curious soul stumbled upon a hidden latch cleverly concealed within a dusty bookshelf. With a hushed click, the bookshelf swung open, revealing a secret passageway leading to a forgotten chamber. The air within was heavy, stagnant with the passage of time. In that eerie space, devoid of furniture save for a solitary chair firmly bolted to the floor, a chilling message was etched repeatedly on the walls: "I am still here." The site foreman swiftly contacted the authorities, and what was meant to be a routine demolition swiftly morphed into something far more ominous. Detective Morgan Walsh, seasoned by 2 decades of police work, stood at the threshold of the hidden room, his flashlight piercing the darkness to unveil the unsettling words that adorned the walls. "Secure the area," Walsh commanded the officers, his voice resonating in the cramped confines. "No one disturbs a thing until forensics arrives." The library's history unfurled a tale as enigmatic as the hidden room itself. Once owned by the influential Harrington family, The library had been bequeathed to the public following the mysterious vanishing of their daughter, Rebecca. Her disappearance during her final year of college had left a void, her abandoned car the only trace found near the woods. Despite extensive investigations, the case had grown cold, though her family harbored suspicions of darker forces at play. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they unearthed strands of hair and fibers embedded in the chair, while the scratches on the walls bore traces of blood and skin cells beneath the layers of neglect. Initial analysis hinted at a young female origin. This chair was meant for confinement, the forensic analyst remarked, pointing to the weathered leather straps and bolt holes that once held a captive in place. Whoever was held here fought fiercely. Detective Walsh, haunted by the timing of the library's donation to the public shortly after Rebecca's disappearance, delved deeper into the Harrington family's past. An unsettling revelation emerged. The contractor who had installed the bookshelf leading to the hidden room had ties to Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the family's patriarch. Financial records hinted at exorbitant payments to this contractor, far exceeding ordinary renovation costs. Former library staff expressed shock at the discovery, none aware of the concealed room's existence. However, an elderly librarian reminisced about Maxwell's peculiar insistence on preserving that section untouched during renovations, claiming its historical significance. She recalled his solitary visits to the secluded area after hours, a detail that now loomed ominously in the investigation. The dark truth unfurled when DNA tests confirmed the biological material in the hidden room matched samples from Rebecca's belongings. The pieces aligned with a grim narrative. Rebecca had not fled, but had been imprisoned behind the bookshelf, potentially by a member of her own family. With a warrant secured, detectives scoured the Harrington estate, unearthing a journal hidden in Maxwell's study. Its entries chronicled a disturbing fixation on his niece, culminating in a chilling final note. She threatened exposure. I had no choice. The room will keep her until she sees reason. Confronted with the damning evidence, Maxwell's veneer of innocence shattered. She was a threat to everything, he confessed stoically. Rebecca stumbled upon my embezzlement and had to be silenced. The family's reputation was at stake. I had to protect it. His admission painted a macabre picture: Rebecca lured, imprisoned, and ultimately slain in a bid to safeguard a dark secret. Beneath the floor of the hidden room, ground-penetrating radar unveiled human remains. Excavation brought forth Rebecca's skeletal frame, clad in the silver bracelet gifted by her parents. At Maxwell's trial, the Harrington family watched in somber silence as justice caught up with the man who had extinguished a bright life. Rebecca's mother clutched the recovered bracelet, a tangible link to her daughter's memory. The library's demolition ground to a halt, becoming a somber memorial for a life unjustly snuffed out. Tributes of flowers adorned the entrance, a silent acknowledgement of a life cut short and a truth concealed behind a facade of normalcy. In a poignant twist, Rebecca's desperate plea on the walls, "I am still here," ensured her legacy endured, a beacon of remembrance and a promise that justice, no matter how delayed, would ultimately prevail. Story 18. The town held its secrets close, never mentioning the house that stood at the edge of the woods. It loomed solitary, its windows darkened, its porch weary from the weight of time. No one laid claim to it, no one could recall its builder. Yet when a band of hikers strayed too near, they beheld an eerie sight: names etched into the wooden siding, carved deep like silent warnings. And at the end of the list, fresh and untouched, was a name unfamiliar to them all. Until, with a trembling voice, one among them whispered, "That name is mine." In the dead of night, a call came through to dispatch, marked as a routine trespassing incident. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the lead hiker who had stumbled upon his own name carved into the forsaken house. The responding officers anticipated nothing beyond a juvenile prank, maybe a jest among companions, but what they encountered defied logic. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as the darkness draped the forest in a cloak of shadows. Her flashlight pierced through the gloom, revealing the aged front of the structure. The names 27 in all ran vertically down the eastern wall. Some had faded into obscurity with time, barely discernible against the weathered wood. Others remained sharp, as if freshly carved. And at the base, Mason Wright, the incision still fragrant with the scent of fresh wood shavings. "I've never set foot here before," Mason declared, his breath materializing in the frigid air. "I cannot fathom how anyone could know my name." The inquiry commenced with thorough checks on each name inscribed. The findings sent shivers down the spines of the detective team. Every name corresponded to an individual reported missing over the past 40 years. Some cases had grown cold, while others lingered open. Yet, a chilling commonality bound them all: the vanished souls had disappeared while trekking alone. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the differing depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, aligned with a missing persons file from 37 years prior. The records recounted a youthful woman who ventured into those very woods and never returned, leaving behind only a lone hiking boot by a babbling stream. Detective Keller probed Mason extensively, yet his narrative remained unwavering. He bore no ties to the area beyond this particular hiking expedition with 4 college comrades. They had selected the trail at random, guided solely by an online suggestion. Nothing in his background linked him to any of the other names etched upon the wall. The focus of the investigation pivoted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, furnished snapshots captured during their hike. Upon scrutiny, analysts discerned a disquieting detail: a blurred figure loomed in the background of 3 distinct photographs. The form resembled a tall, slender man, perpetually obscured by the foliage. "We encountered no one else on our journey," Emily maintained. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller sanctioned a search of the house's interior. Though the edifice appeared forsaken, dust cloaked every surface. Furnishings lay in disarray. Officers unearthed a disquieting spectacle in the basement. Personal effects belonging to the missing hikers were meticulously arranged on orderly shelves. Watches, rucksacks, cameras, wallets, each item labeled with a name corresponding to those on the exterior wall. The evidence technicians toiled meticulously, documenting every article. Under the glow of ultraviolet light, aged bloodstains materialized on the concrete floor, vestiges of attempts to cleanse the scene. Ground-penetrating radar unveiled no buried bodies beneath the house, yet cadaver dogs incessantly signaled at the rear of the property, where the forest grew densest. As the investigation deepened, Detective Keller observed peculiar conduct from Mason Wright. He reported bizarre incidents: whispers at his window, fresh footprints leading to his door but not away, specters lingering in the street. A patrol was assigned to safeguard him, but Mason's paranoia swelled. The breakthrough arrived with the unearthing of land records concealed within county archives. The house had belonged to a recluse hunter named Victor Blackwood, a man seldom glimpsed by neighbors, described as an unsettlingly tall, emaciated figure who shunned discourse. Blackwood vanished without a trace 15 years ago, his disappearance left uninvestigated. Armed with a warrant, Detective Keller delved deeper into the encircling woods. The search party unearthed a network of rudimentary hunting blinds strategically stationed along popular trails. Within one blind, a journal was discovered containing meticulous notes, observations of hikers, their paths, gear, and routines. The script mirrored samples from Victor Blackwood's scant documents. The entries evolved from hunting tactics for wildlife to treating humans as prey, depicting their behaviors, weaknesses, and strategies for acquisition. The final pages delineated elaborate accounts of stalking each victim on the wall, including detailed narratives of how he selected his prey. A manhunt for Blackwood was launched across multiple jurisdictions. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scoured the forest canopy. Tactical units meticulously combed every crevice and cavern, yet the quarry remained elusive. Mason Wright ceased all communication. Officers dispatched to his abode discovered it deserted, the chambers barren. On the bedroom wall, freshly etched, a sole sentence loomed: "The hunter becomes the hunted." The pursuit of Mason endured fruitlessly for weeks. Then, during a secondary sweep of Blackwood's abode, forensic specialists unearthed a bone-chilling revelation. Concealed behind a false partition in the basement, a small workshop was uncovered housing woodworking tools, jars of wood preservatives, and a freshly carved wooden piece bearing a novel name not yet affixed to the exterior wall. Detective Keller recognized the name instantly. It belonged to the chief forensic analyst who had scrutinized the house during the initial inquiry. The analyst had called in unwell that morning and remained unreachable by phone. Authorities erected an unceasing surveillance cordon around the house. Cameras surveilled every approach. Motion sensors stood sentinel against intrusions. The trap was set. 3 nights later, the sensors sounded an alarm. Surveillance footage captured a figure emerging from the woods, unbelievably tall and slender, moving with an uncanny fluidity. The figure advanced directly toward the house, seemingly undeterred by the surveillance. As tactical squads closed in, the cameras briefly lost signal. When the system rebooted, the figure had vanished. To this day, the house remains under perpetual watch. Mason Wright and the forensic analyst were never located. The investigation persists, with fresh resources allocated as similar vanishings are reported in other wooded realms. The names etched on the wall have become a macabre legend among law enforcers. Some officers abstain from uttering them aloud, others shun the case entirely. And local hikers steer clear of the house, fearing that merely discussing it could add their names to that dreadful list, the unspoken names. Story 19. The aged apartment held its secrets, pipes that groaned, floorboards that whispered stories of days long gone, but the new occupant sensed a presence beyond the ordinary. The footsteps echoed from above, a slow, deliberate rhythm that defied explanation, yet she dwelled on the highest floor. One night, emboldened by curiosity, she tapped the ceiling with a broomstick. The sound ceased. Silence enveloped the space. Then a solitary knock resonated from within the ceiling itself. Sarah Coleman chose to keep the mysterious knock to herself, attributing it to the settling of the building, or perhaps a curious critter exploring the hidden nooks above. Despite her efforts to drown out the persistent footfalls that traversed her ceiling each night with heightened TV volume and headphones, Sarah couldn't escape the eerie presence that lurked above her in the darkness. Detective Morris became involved when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawl space while conducting routine repairs. Behind a section of drywall outside Sarah's apartment, a narrow passage materialized, defying the building's known layout. Illuminated by a flashlight, the hidden chamber revealed remnants of a makeshift living space, discarded wrappers, empty bottles, a stained blanket, and a weathered notebook. The police were summoned promptly. Detective Morris and his partner, Detective Rivera, arrived to an agitated maintenance worker who repeated, "Someone's been living in the walls, someone's been watching." The notebook chronicled meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman, her routines, visitors, dining preferences, entertainment choices, even her most intimate moments. The writing, once orderly, descended into chaos, marked by cryptic symbols in the margins. The subject no longer responds to my signals, the final entry lamented. She has chosen to ignore me. No one ignores me. Forensic teams combed the hidden passages, unearthing fingerprints that remained unidentified in any database. An intricate network of tunnels interwoven within the building's structure, some dating back decades, was unveiled. These passages linked to multiple apartments, culminating in observation points concealed within Sarah's residence alone. Interviews with current residents yielded no anomalies, but former tenants recounted unsettling experiences of being watched, of inexplicable disturbances. One tenant had fled after a mere fortnight, unwilling to voice their fears for sounding paranoid. The breakthrough arrived with the discovery of microscopic blood splatters in one of the hidden spaces. DNA analysis connected the blood to Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished without a trace 4 years earlier. His disappearance had puzzled authorities, the case gone cold. Martin had inhabited the apartment directly beneath Sarah's, and his complaints of noises from above, allegedly from a reclusive neighbor named Edward, hinted at a sinister undercurrent. Delving into Martin's history, investigators unearthed a pattern in Edward's transient existence. A recluse who gravitated towards top-floor units in various apartment buildings, Edward had left behind a trail of unease and unanswered questions. A visit to a remote cabin owned by Edward unveiled a chilling tableau photographs of unsuspecting residents, intricate diagrams of building structures, and journals detailing the maintenance of the habitat. Behind the cabin, a grisly revelation awaited a series of freshly disturbed graves. The victims, former residents of buildings where Edward had resided, bore witness to his clandestine activities. As forensic experts commenced the somber task of identification, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's apartment complex. Though the crawl spaces had been sealed, whispers of unseen movements persisted. During the installation of enhanced security measures, a startling find emerged: a second notebook, nestled in a corner, hinting at a new hideaway. The notebook held a cryptic message: "They found my old nest, but not my new one." The ominous note mirrored the previous entries, a crude sketch of Sarah's apartment layout with a crimson path marking a new passage, forewarned of impending danger. Rushing to Sarah's residence, officers were met with an empty apartment, the remnants of her hasty departure evident. A chilling message etched on the bathroom mirror guided their gaze upwards: "Look up." The manhunt for Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a skilled construction worker adept in covert renovations, intensified. Thermal scans revealed no current occupancy within the walls of Sarah's building, leaving her fate shrouded in uncertainty. Linked to a series of disappearances spanning multiple states, Sarah's case underscored the dangers lurking within the seemingly mundane realm of apartment living. Detective Morris, haunted by the phantom echoes of unseen footsteps, pondered the silent watchers hidden among the shadows. Often, in the quiet of his own dwelling, he found himself gazing up at his ceiling, attuned to the whispers of the night, wondering if, somewhere out there, another pair of eyes followed his every move, waiting in the shadows for their chance to strike. Story 20. The river flowed gently that morning, its surface smooth as glass, barely a ripple disturbing its stillness. The fisherman, his mind lost in the tranquility of the moment, almost missed the peculiar sight of a suitcase bobbing near the shore. At first glance, it appeared as if someone had carelessly discarded a pile of old garments. But as he approached, a pungent odor assaulted his senses, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. The case was bound in chains, its corners tarnished by the relentless exposure to the elements. When the authorities pried it open, they were met not by garments, but by a haunting discovery. Inside lay strands of hair, fingers frozen in a silent grip, and at the very bottom, a cryptic note that sent shivers down their spines. This isn't the first. Detective Sarah Mercer stood at the scene, a handkerchief pressed delicately against her nose, studying the grim tableau before her. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s, her once dark hair now matted from the water, her skin pallid and marked by the river's touch. The forensic team worked meticulously, cataloging every detail with precision before the body was tenderly lifted from its watery grave. What struck Mercer most profoundly was not the manner of disposal, but the eerie reverence with which the victim had been presented manicured nails, freshly styled hair, adorned in luxurious attire. She wasn't just discarded here, Mercer murmured, her gaze fixed on the muddy shore caressed by the lapping water. She was arranged, showcased. The victim was identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her expertise in selling high-end properties. Divorced, childless, she led a solitary life in an affluent neighborhood. Colleagues spoke of her as driven, meticulous, a private soul. Her absence was noted when she failed to show up for a crucial showing with affluent clients, an appointment she would never willingly miss, according to her concerned assistant. As investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously maintained modernist abode, a sense of unease settled over them. Every aspect of her home exuded perfection, furniture meticulously arranged, surfaces gleaming immaculately. The fridge held neatly organized meals, each container labeled by day. Her wardrobe was a symphony of colors, shoes carefully shielded in protective covers. The anomaly lay in her home office, a drawer slightly ajar revealing a leather-bound journal. The final entry sent chills down their spines. He's watching again. Same car, different plates. Further probing into Walsh's digital footprint uncovered a pattern in her emails, repeated messages from unknown senders, all bearing the ominous phrase, "I see your perfection," dispatched at precisely the same time on various days. Her browsing history hinted at her growing unease, searches for security systems and personal protection devices dotting the timeline. Mercer pieced together these fragments of a chilling puzzle, drawing a connection between the meticulous care taken with the victim's body and the unnerving messages Walsh had received, an elaborate ritual, not a crime of passion. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, a local pawn shop owner recognizing Walsh's distinct emerald necklace among the items pawned. The culprit was revealed to be Michael Linden, an unassuming maintenance worker with a penchant for blending into the background. Surveillance footage unveiled his repeated visits to Walsh's building, sometimes with his maintenance cart, other times without, meticulously timing his entrances for when she was absent. A search of Linden's modest dwelling uncovered a macabre trove of photographs of Walsh and other women, all sharing a striking resemblance, all taken unbeknownst to them. Some images were cruelly marked with red crosses. Walsh was but one of his victims. Behind a concealed panel in his closet, investigators stumbled upon a shrine of sorts, each victim's possessions arranged meticulously: a lock of hair, used tissues stained with lipstick, keys, receipts. A small notebook chronicling their habits, preferences, daily routines completed the grim tableau. As Linden was escorted into the interrogation room, an unsettling chill pervaded the air. His demeanor remained eerily composed, his appearance neat, his voice devoid of emotion. When pressed, he uttered with chilling calmness, "They were flawed. They paraded their perfection, but I saw through their facade. Catherine's desk drawer was always in disarray, her lipstick never quite perfect, her perfection was a lie. The search for the other victims mentioned in his note led investigators to desolate locations where more suitcases were found. Each contained a woman akin to Walsh, all real estate agents who prided themselves on their flawless attention to detail. During Lyndon's trial, he sat unmoving, his countenance a mask of indifference as the prosecution unveiled the sinister intricacies of his methods. He had stalked each victim meticulously, learning their lives, infiltrating their sanctuaries, before correcting what he perceived as their imperfections, grooming them, adorning them before extinguishing their light. As the judge pronounced a sentence of life without parole, the families of the victims watched in silent grief. For Detective Mercer, the case was closed officially, yet a lingering shadow of unanswered questions haunted her. What drove Lyndon to fixate on these particular women? What darkness within himself was he trying to obliterate through his heinous acts? The river meandered ceaselessly downstream, its waters slowly erasing all traces of the tragedy. But in the precinct on Mercer's desk lay copies of those haunting notebooks, a stark reminder that behind the facades of ordinary lives, darkness sometimes lurks, hidden in plain sight. And perhaps the most treacherous predators are those who blend seamlessly into the tapestry of everyday existence, waiting, watching for the slightest flaw to reveal itself. Story 21. The quaint costume shop was nearing its final days, a place of hidden treasures now unveiling its secrets to the last few curious souls who wandered its aisles. Among the fading remnants of costumes past, a woman with an eye for the peculiar reached out to touch a mask resting on a forgotten shelf. The features of the mask were exquisite yet unnervingly real, a delicate craftsmanship that seemed to hold a life of its own within its painted contours. As she approached the dusty counter to make her purchase, the cashier's eyes flickered with a hint of unease. "That's not one of ours," he muttered, a shadow of doubt clouding his voice. Perplexed, the woman glanced at the mask in her hands, searching in vain for a tag that would reveal its origin. Finding none, she simply shrugged and decided to take it home, drawn to its mysterious allure. That fateful night, a subtle sound roused her from slumber, a whisper of fabric shifting, a presence stirring in the darkness. Her heart quickened as she scanned the room, only to find the mask perched on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, would never be seen alive again. Her neighbor, drawn by a sense of foreboding, discovered the chilling scene that awaited within Catherine's home. The front door stood ajar, allowing the soft glow of dawn to spill into the silent abode. There in the stillness of her bedroom, Catherine lay motionless on the floor, the eerie mask vanished without a trace. Detective Morgan arrived at the haunting scene, where the morning light cast a somber hue upon the unfolding mystery. The shutter clicks of the forensic team punctuated the hushed whispers that filled the air. As the detective surveyed the room, her keen eyes caught details that hinted at a story untold, a drawer slightly ajar, a lipstick-stained water glass, and a life extinguished in inexplicable terror. The medical examiner's examination yielded no immediate answers, no visible wounds or signs of struggle to account for Catherine's demise. Instead, the frozen mask of terror etched upon her face told a haunting tale of fear that transcended the physical realm. Catherine's life as an art appraiser painted a picture of meticulous precision and a keen eye for authenticity, traits that now seemed to have led her down a dark path towards an enigmatic end. Colleagues spoke of her uncanny ability to discern the genuine from the counterfeit, a skill that may have unwittingly sealed her tragic fate. The investigation took a chilling turn when security footage from the costume shop revealed a disturbing anomaly, The mask that had found its way into Catherine's possession bore no trace of belonging to the shop's inventory. The cashier's confusion and the owner's denial hinted at a deeper mystery, shrouded in darkness. A thread of connection emerged as forensics uncovered microscopic fibers on Catherine's fingertips, fibers woven from an otherworldly blend of human hair and an organic substance that defied identification. Each victim's tale woven with threads of terror, each death a piece of a puzzle that spanned decades without resolution. A retired detective, steeped in the shadows of a similar case, shared a revelation that unveiled the ancient origins of the masks. Hidden within each mask, behind its painted facade, lay cryptic symbols hinting at a ritual of soul transference, a ritual that now seemed to claim its victims with a silent and deadly grip. In the depths of Catherine's home, a journal surfaced from its clandestine hiding place, revealing her descent into a world of dread and discovery. Her frantic words spoke of a malevolent force lurking within the mask, a sinister entity that watched her every move, waiting to claim its next host in a macabre dance of death. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place as the detective pieced together Catherine's final hours, the strange fibers, and the chilling pattern of deaths that echoed through the years. The cause of Catherine's demise, a heart seized by unyielding terror, left a question hanging in the air: what unspeakable horror could drive a soul to the brink of oblivion with fear alone? Surveillance footage from a vigilant neighbor's camera unveiled a specter haunting Catherine's home, a figure clad in the mask, moving with her gait yet devoid of humanity, a puppeteer's macabre creation mimicking life with a chilling precision. The hunt for the elusive mask led investigators on a trail that spanned the country, where whispers of its reappearance echoed through the corridors of time. But like a phantom in the night, the mask slipped through their grasp, leaving only shadows and unanswered questions in its wake. The detective, keeper of Catherine's truth, safeguarded the journal that bore witness to a terror beyond comprehension, a truth too strange for the world to bear. In the stillness of the night, she felt a presence lingering at the edge of her consciousness, a reminder of the mask that hungered for souls, biding its time until it found its next unwitting victim. As the world slept in blissful ignorance, the mask waited in the shadows, a vessel of ancient malevolence seeking to claim its due once more. And when it emerged from the darkness, another would wake to the silent gaze of empty eye holes, a harbinger of nightmares yet to unfold. Story 22, the Polaroid lay nestled among forgotten memories, capturing a birthday celebration from years gone by. Smiles frozen in time, candles flickering innocently, it all seemed ordinary at first glance. Yet as the daughter sifted through the box of old photos passed down to her, something caught her eye. A figure lurking in the background on the fringes of the group. A man, shrouded in darkness, standing just beyond the warm glow of the candles. He was not a part of the family, not a familiar face from those cherished moments. And yet, with each photograph, he crept closer. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the collection while clearing out her mother's attic after the solemnity of the funeral had passed. A simple cardboard box labeled Memories held within it a plethora of faded snapshots documenting family gatherings from her childhood. What should have been a comforting discovery, a journey through happier times, quickly transformed into the prologue of a haunting tale. In the initial photo, he was a mere whisper of a presence, a shadow lingering at the periphery during her 7th birthday bash. The mysterious figure stood by the glass door, features masked by darkness, silently observing. In the subsequent image, taken moments later, he had stealthily made his way inside. By the 3rd snapshot, he loomed behind her uncle, a phantom in the background. No one in the frames seemed to acknowledge his existence. Trembling, Sarah reached out to her father, her voice quivering as she recounted the unsettling revelation. "Dad, who is this man haunting all these pictures?" A heavy silence hung in the air before her father's abrupt inhale. "What man? There should be no one else but family." Fearing the unknown, she snapped digital photos of the Polaroids and forwarded them to her father. His subsequent call was laced with an uncharacteristic unease. "This can't be. We would have noticed a stranger." Detective Marcus Reed sat attentively as Sarah laid out the photographs on his desk at the precinct, rain tapping a soothing rhythm against the windows, casting dancing shadows over the evidence. With weathered hands, the detective meticulously examined each photo, his gaze narrowing. "No one recognized this individual?" he inquired, his voice calm yet intrigued. "No one," Sarah affirmed, arranging the photos in chronological order. As the detective lined in, the chilling reality unfolded before them. The enigmatic figure traversed through the party, advancing closer to the children with each captured moment. In the final image, he stood ominously behind Sarah's younger self, a pale hand extending toward her shoulder just beyond the frame. Reed postulated the one behind the camera, but doubt tinged his words. "My mother took these pictures." She set the timer and joined the shot. Replicating the images and initiating a case file, the detective swiftly reached out to all surviving attendees of the party. None remembered the mysterious man, no hired help, no unexpected guests. The property, secluded in the countryside, had been carefully selected for its privacy. Facial recognition software proved futile. The figure strategically evaded detection in every photo, a phantom aware of the lens upon him. Yet his posture exuded a practiced, deliberate demeanor. The investigation might have reached an impasse had Sarah not unearthed more photos in other family albums. Diverse gatherings, different years. Same shadowy presence, always lingering unnoticed in the backdrop. A digital specialist enhanced the images, unveiling obscure details under harsh light. A scar on the wrist, a distinctive ring, a partial reflection revealing features once concealed in shadow. The breakthrough emerged from dental records. The teeth visible in an enhanced image matched those of Robert Keller, a maintenance worker who had vanished after being linked to 3 child disappearances spanning the region. Cold cases from decades past, cases that coincided with the gatherings captured in the photos. Keller had been employed by the cleaning company servicing the vacation property where Sarah's birthday festivities took place. He held master keys to numerous rental properties in the area, properties where families had congregated, properties from which children had vanished. Excavating Keller's former residence, authorities unearthed buried artifacts beneath the concrete. A hair clip akin to one worn by a missing girl, a toy car belonging to a vanished boy from a family reunion. A bracelet that Sarah recognized as her own keepsake she thought lost in her youth. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the haunting visuals that had unveiled concealed horrors spanning decades, Sarah received a call from the detective. Remains discovered near one of the vacation properties had been identified through DNA as one of the missing children. Gazing at the final birthday photo, the warm candlelight casting a serene glow over her family's faces frozen in jubilation, she beheld the figure once more. Lurking behind her younger self, shrouded in shadow but undeniably present, he watched, patient, calculating, imperceptible to all in that moment of bliss. The revelation knitted together unsolved mysteries across time. Families found closure, albeit not the solace they had sought. The shadow in the family album had stepped into the realm of justice, his presence finally acknowledged after years of concealed visibility. Sarah tenderly placed the photos back into the box. They stood as evidence now. Testimony to the chilling truth that sometimes the gravest dangers hide in plain sight within captured moments unseen by the naked eye phantom figures that drift through celebrations unnoticed, leaving behind a faint trace of their transient existence in the tapestry of time. Story 23. She wiped the steam off the mirror, gazing at her own reflection. Everything appeared normal, her features in place, her attire unchanged. Yet a subtle unease crept upon her. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a movement not of her own making. Turning away, she expected the reflection to mimic her actions. Instead, it remained unmoving, watching her intently. This unsettling moment marked the beginning of Rebecca Thorne's enigmatic journey. What unfolded would puzzle investigators and cast a shadow over the community for years to come. Rebecca resided alone in a modest apartment nestled within a serene suburban enclave. Known for her meticulous nature and reserved demeanor, she maintained polite interactions with her neighbors while predominantly keeping to herself. Her occupation as a data analyst for a mid-sized firm structured her days with routine and precision. There was nothing about her outward appearance that hinted at her eventual entanglement in one of the most enigmatic criminal mysteries of the era. Initially dismissed as mere absent-mindedness, the first signs of disturbance manifested subtly. Objects in Rebecca's living space shifted inexplicably, no items missing, only rearranged. A coffee mug relocated, books rearranged, her toothbrush oddly placed. She brushed off these peculiar occurrences as the side effects of her demanding work schedule, where long hours under harsh fluorescent lights blurred the line between reality and exhaustion. Detective Marion Shaw received the initial complaint after weeks of such disturbances when Rebecca finally reached out to the authorities. The initial assessment leaned towards mental health concerns rather than criminal activity, as there were no signs of forced entry, missing possessions, or damaged locks. It was a feeling of wrongness in her own home, Shaw would later recount. The report found its place among the stack of non-urgent cases awaiting further developments. The pivotal moment arrived with the bathroom mirror incident. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca recounted the eerie experience of her reflection moving independently, the sensation of being observed even in solitude. This time, she presented tangible evidence, a self-installed security camera aimed at her front door. The footage unearthed a chilling revelation that sent shivers down the spines of seasoned officers. It captured Rebecca leaving for work, followed shortly by an identical figure using a key to enter her apartment. Forensic scrutiny confirmed the authenticity of the footage, revealing an uncanny mimicry of Rebecca's appearance and possessions by the intruder. "We are facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superiors. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and mastered her likeness with unsettling precision." The investigation escalated as fingerprints within the apartment exclusively matched Rebecca's, devoid of foreign DNA traces. Neighbors reported no unusual sightings, only routine glimpses of Rebecca coming and going. Mrs. Keller shared an instance where she greeted Rebecca upon her return, receiving no response, a deviation from Rebecca's usual behavior, albeit not deemed alarming. Rebecca commenced documenting each disturbance in a journal as minor alterations in her surroundings multiplied. Consumables she had not purchased vanished from her fridge. Her computer displayed searches she did not initiate, and unsettlingly, selfies surfaced on her phone resembling her yet captured without her awareness. In those images, subtle discrepancies tainted her expression, distorting her familiar features into an unsettling semblance. "I feel as though I am losing my grip on reality," she confided to Detective Shaw during their subsequent meeting. Or perhaps someone is orchestrating this turmoil to drive me to the brink. The breakthrough materialized when a pattern emerged from the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated Rebecca's abode during her absence for specific scheduled activities, therapeutic sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs. A meticulously planned surveillance and intrusion, not a product of happenstance. A forensic psychologist postulated a fixation scenario where the perpetrator fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, gradually morphing into her persona. Such occurrences, though rare, found their roots in psychological obsessions where the assailant coveted traits symbolized by the victim: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The inquiry zeroed in on a former co-worker of Rebecca's, Lily Winters, who had exhibited erratic behavior leading to her dismissal. Lily's unsettling emails to Rebecca insinuating a shared identity and her obsession with mirroring Rebecca's essence further fueled suspicions. Upon securing a search warrant for Lily's residence, investigators unearthed a chilling reality. A room within Lily's apartment had metamorphosed into an eerie replica of Rebecca's bedroom, adorned with countless snapshots of Rebecca navigating her daily routine, oblivious to the voyeuristic lens. A wardrobe stocked with duplicates of Rebecca's attire, makeup brands identical to Rebecca's preferences, and meticulous notes on Rebecca's nuances, speech patterns, and daily rituals littered the space. The most incriminating evidence surfaced in the form of practice videos where Lily painstakingly imitated Rebecca's gait, gestures, and expressions, progressing from clumsy mimicry to near-perfect emulation. She aspired to become me. A hushed revelation escaped Rebecca as she confronted the undeniable proof. Her intent wasn't mere imitation, but erasure of my very existence. Forensic analysis unveiled sophisticated tools for key replication and electronic access card cloning in Lily's possession, alongside an intricate system monitoring Rebecca's movements, including a meticulously curated schedule predictive of her routine. What eluded investigators was Lily's endgame. Journals recovered from her abode oscillated between first and third person, blurring the lines of identity as they oscillated between references to Rebecca as both me and her. A chilling entry hinted at a looming convergence. Soon, only one shall endure. The stronger entity will prevail. When authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a residence hastily vacated with traces of hurried escape evident. A nationwide hunt ensued as Rebecca was ushered into protective custody, resettled in an undisclosed secure haven under constant surveillance. Every location associated with her past was vigilantly monitored for 3 weeks, yet Lily remained elusive. The narrative took a harrowing turn when a security personnel at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Rebecca, under protective seclusion, was sighted entering the premises despite her absence. Surveillance footage verified the intrusion, a mirror image of Rebecca wielding a valid ID card, perusing her former desk and scrutinizing her files before departure. The implication loomed large: Lily had not fled but seamlessly assumed Rebecca's identity, seamlessly slipping into her existence while the real Rebecca remained in seclusion. The case lingered in limbo, officially unresolved. Lily Winters eluded capture, and Rebecca Thorne chose to forge a new identity in an undisclosed refuge, relinquishing her former life. Detective Shaw retained a photograph on her desk, a juxtaposition of 2 eerily similar women. One portrayed Rebecca Thorne, the other embodied Lily Winters. As she scrutinized their features, seeking nuances that set them apart, Shaw often imparted a sobering lesson to young recruits. The true terror lies not in someone mirroring your appearance or echoing your voice. It resides in their fervent desire to assume your identity, erasing themselves in the process. Our identity isn't merely what we present to the world, but a cherished facet we safeguard zealously, recognizing its worth only when threatened by those who seek to claim it. Story 24. Aged apartment exuded a sense of history, its walls holding secrets whispered through time. The heating system let out a low groan, the pipes rattled softly. It was a familiar tune in the old building, a lullaby of creaks and sighs that lulled its inhabitants to sleep each night. Or so they thought, until she heard it. A voice, barely a whisper, drifted through the labyrinth of vents, reaching out like a ghostly hand. It wasn't the typical hum of distant conversations or the echo of footsteps in the hallway. This voice was different. It was calling her name, a soft beckoning that sent shivers down her spine. Curiosity piqued. She leaned in closer, pressing her ear against the cold metal grate. A rush of icy air brushed against her cheek, and then almost teasingly the voice spoke again. "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the heart of the empty apartment, a solitary figure amidst the shadows of the past. Her gaze fixated on the rusted vent cover, forcibly torn from its place on the wall. Around her, the forensics team moved with precision, capturing the scene in flashes of light and shadow. The victim, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace, her absence unnoticed until a faint odor lingered in the stale air. What they discovered within the ventilation system defied logic and reason. Reports of voices through the vents, Officer Patel recited, his voice a somber echo in the stillness, dismissed as mere quirks of an old building's infrastructure. Shaw knelt by the vent, tracing the deep gouges on its edges with a furrowed brow. These marks were not the work of tools, but of frantic desperation, of fingernails clawing in a futile attempt to escape from within. The air seemed heavy with unspoken truths, with the weight of a presence unseen but deeply felt. Alina Reeves, a beloved kindergarten teacher, had left behind a life filled with laughter and warmth. Her students had crafted cards in her absence. Her plants basked in sunlight by the window, oblivious to the void left in their caretaker's absence. Her sister had recounted tales of paranoia and fear that had gripped Alina in her final days, the belief that unseen eyes watched her every move, that whispered voices haunted her dreams. As Shaw combed through the apartment, a new narrative unfolded before her eyes. The meticulously arranged bed, the forgotten mug in the sink, the chair positioned beneath the vent as if waiting for a listener. Each detail spoke of a presence lingering just beyond the veil of reality, a specter woven into the fabric of everyday life. The forensics report revealed startling revelations. Fibers from Alina's favorite cardigan trapped in the vent, a fingerprint not her own etched inside the cover. But it was the recordings from Alina's phone that sent a chill down Shaw's spine. Alone in her car, rain cascading like tears against the windshield, she listened. Alina's voice, trembling and vulnerable, reaching out into the void. "If you're real, say something." And in the silence that followed, a whisper, barely audible, "Alina, sweet Alina. Let me in." The history of the building unraveled like a tapestry of shadows. Tenants coming and going, whispers of strange occurrences, of voices that lingered long after their speakers had departed. Harold Weber, the unassuming superintendent, held the keys to every door, every secret concealed within the walls. His demeanor shifted under Shaw's scrutiny, a mask of indifference slipping to reveal a flicker of something darker, something hidden. A hidden passage, a secret realm nestled within the building's bones, unveiled a truth long kept in darkness. A flashlight, a water bottle, remnants of a life lived in shadows. Someone had dwelled within the walls, unseen but ever present, a phantom watching, waiting, whispering. Weber's arrest brought forth a deluge of horror, a revelation of his twisted obsessions laid bare in the light of day. His computer held a trove of stolen moments, a gallery of violated privacy, a journal of madness that spoke of a connection forged in shadows and solitude. The storage unit, a shrine to the lives he had touched, the souls he had claimed as his own. In the courtroom, Weber's eyes held a glimmer of something beyond human comprehension, a certainty born of delusion and decay. His words echoed through the halls of justice, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within the walls. "They'll still hear me," he whispered, a promise or a threat lost in the void of his fractured mind. The building stood silent now, a mausoleum of memories, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past. Residents came and went, drawn by the allure of history and the promise of a fresh start. But the whispers remained, carried on the wind, woven into the fabric of reality. The heating system groaned, the pipes rattled, a symphony of secrets that danced in the shadows. And so the old apartment building stood, a silent sentinel watching over its domain, its walls haunted by the echoes of a presence long gone but never forgotten. The whispers lingered, a reminder of the darkness that dwells within us all, waiting to be heard in the stillness of the night. Story 25. In the quiet of the night, a flicker danced across the baby monitor's screen, a mere anomaly in the eyes of the mother. She brushed it off as mere interference until the crackle of static filled the room and a soft voice murmured, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept down her spine, freezing her in place as she raced to her son's room, heart pounding like distant drums in the night. But as she pushed open the door, the crib stood empty, a void where her precious Samuel should have been. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only witness to this mysterious event was a stuffed rabbit, abandoned on the floor, its unblinking black eyes gazing up at her, holding secrets untold. Rebecca's screams pierced the stillness, echoing through the walls until her voice grew raw with fear and desperation. The neighbors, stirred from their slumber by her anguished cries, rushed to her aid, summoning help in the form of emergency services. When the authorities arrived, they found Rebecca, cradling the stuffed rabbit, lost in a world of disbelief and sorrow on the nursery floor. Samuel, a mere 4 months old, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to fill. The investigation that followed was shrouded in mystery and confusion. There were no signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered by an uninvited guest. The security system stood vigilant throughout the night, its sensors undisturbed. The only clue left behind were the haunting words of the whispered voice that had invaded their home. Rebecca found herself at the center of scrutiny, suspicions swirling around her like a gathering storm. Her husband, Daniel, had been absent on business, leaving shadows of doubt in his wake. Their strained marriage, exacerbated by the weight of Samuel's arrival, cast a shadow over the truth that lay buried beneath layers of uncertainty. Medical records hinted at Rebecca's struggles with postpartum depression, a silent battle that waged within her as she tried to navigate the complexities of motherhood. The detective's gaze lingered on her composed facade, a mask that hid the turmoil within, casting doubts on her maternal instincts in the face of tragedy. Whispers of suspicion drifted through the community, painting Rebecca as a figure of doubt and uncertainty. Then a glimmer of hope emerged from the darkness. Forensic experts unearthed microscopic fibers on the nursery windowsill, foreign threads that wove a tale of clandestine entry and silent departure. A rare climbing rope, its fibers intertwined with the fabric of deception, hinted at an intruder with skills beyond the ordinary. The focus shifted, turning towards the shadows that lurked beyond the safety of their home. Security footage from neighboring homes unveiled a figure cloaked in darkness, a phantom moving with purpose and stealth. A footprint etched in the soft earth of the garden bore the imprint of a specialized boot, a mark of expertise and experience. Rebecca's innocence began to unravel as Daniel returned from his travels, his hands bearing the calluses of a hidden pastime. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, revealing a disturbing truth hidden in plain sight. Financial records painted a grim portrait of Daniel's intentions, a life insurance policy taken out on Samuel, a child he had claimed to love. Phone records whispered of clandestine conversations, a web of deceit spun in shadows. The revelation of a second family, a hidden world unknown to Rebecca, shattered the fragile facade of their life together. As the investigation deepened, the baby monitor emerged as a silent witness to the truth. Its digital eyes peeled back the layers of deception, revealing a web of lies that ensnared them all. The voice that had beckoned Samuel into the night had not originated from within their home, but had been a puppet master's call from afar. The hunt led the investigators to a dimly lit basement where a woman named Elaine stood, her eyes empty of remorse as she surrendered to the inevitable. The ties that bound her to Daniel, a past filled with loss and longing, came to light through the lens of time and memory. Samuel, nestled in her arms, was a beacon of hope in a sea of despair, a child lost and found in the depths of betrayal. Daniel's denial crumbled under the weight of evidence, his betrayal laid bare for all to see. The encrypted messages, the fibers of deception woven into his life, painted a damning portrait of a man consumed by greed and desire. The trial echoed with the echoes of a whispered voice, the truth finally breaking free from its shackles of silence. As the gavel fell, justice was served, but the scars of that fateful night would linger, a shadow cast over the innocence that had been stolen. Rebecca and Samuel sought solace in a new beginning, a fresh start far from the echoes of the past. The baby monitor, once a beacon of protection, now stood as a silent sentinel, a reminder of the darkness that had once crept into their lives. In the stillness of the night, as Samuel drifted into dreams, Rebecca held the stuffed rabbit close, its black eyes a silent witness to the truth that had been revealed. The monitor never lied. It had captured the essence of a night filled with whispers and shadows, a night that would forever haunt their dreams. Story 26. The ancient box lay hidden beneath layers of accumulated clutter in the attic, a silent witness to the passage of time and the forgotten memories of past inhabitants. Within its weathered confines rested a collection of faded Polaroids, capturing moments of joy and togetherness from long ago. Routine scenes of birthday celebrations and family gatherings unfolded in muted hues, evoking a sense of nostalgia and tranquility. Yet amidst these ordinary snapshots, a single photograph stood out, shrouded in an aura of mystery and unease. In this final image, framed by the familiar setting of her own living room, a family unknown to Rebecca posed cheerfully for the camera. The couch, the curtains, the very essence of the room mirrored her own surroundings, but the faces that smiled back at her were strangers. And lurking in the shadows behind them, barely discernible in the dim light, stood a figure, a man observing silently, his presence ominous and unsettling. As Rebecca gazed intently at the enigmatic photograph, a chill crept up her spine, sending tremors through her fingertips that caused the edges of the Polaroid to quiver. The family in the picture, a woman with golden locks, a bespectacled man, and 2 children, appeared frozen in a moment of blissful ignorance, unaware of the looming danger just beyond their sight. The weight of the unknown pressed down on her, suffusing the once familiar house with an oppressive stillness that made her steps heavy as she descended the creaking wooden stairs. Placing the unsettling image on her kitchen counter, Rebecca scrutinized it beneath the harsh glare of fluorescent light. The eerie resemblance between her home and the scene captured in the photograph was undeniable. The archway leading to the hallway, the intricate crown molding, the bay window that bathed the room in morning light. This was her sanctuary, yet these interlopers had left their mark, their presence a spectral echo of a bygone era. A seasoned detective, clad in a worn leather jacket that hinted at untold stories, arrived to unravel the threads of mystery woven through the photograph. Detective Morgan's penetrating gaze swept over the image with a practiced eye, his gloved hand tracing the edges of the Polaroid before turning it over to reveal a blank expanse. In a voice like distant thunder, he inquired about the previous owners, the elusive Nelson family, prompting Rebecca to confess her scant knowledge of their abrupt departure. With a silent nod, Morgan requested possession of the photograph, his intentions veiled behind a facade of stoic professionalism. As the investigation unfolded, a web of secrets began to unfurl, reaching back through time to unveil a pattern of disappearances that spanned generations. Each family that had occupied the house before Rebecca had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that defied explanation. The trail led to the enigmatic Sutherland family, whose sudden disappearance had marked the beginning of a sinister legacy. Witnesses recalled their swift exit, the abrupt cessation of daily routines, and the eerie silence that followed in their wake. Forensic analysis of the photograph hinted at a sinister presence, a phantom figure shrouded in darkness and intent on observing the unsuspecting occupants of the house. As the investigation delved deeper, a chilling revelation emerged: a hidden chamber beneath the house, concealing the preserved remains of all those who had vanished without a trace. The earth yielded its grim secrets, revealing a macabre tableau of lost lives and unanswered questions. Among the relics unearthed was the camera that had captured the haunting image in the attic, a silent witness to the tragedies that had unfolded within those walls. The specter of Samuel Whitfield, the elusive architect whose shadow loomed large over the house's dark history, emerged from the shadows of the past. His spectral presence, captured in the photograph and echoed in the chilling accounts of those who had crossed his path, hinted at a malevolent force that defied comprehension. The house, once a sanctuary, now stood as a monument to his inscrutable designs, a repository of lost souls and forgotten dreams. Rebecca, now a reluctant protagonist in a tale of terror and intrigue, sought refuge in the sanctuary of a hotel room, her every breath a reminder of the looming threat that stalked her every move. The night brought no solace, only the haunting echo of a phone call, the mechanical click of a camera, and the silent promise of impending doom. The investigation continued, a relentless pursuit of truth in the face of inscrutable darkness. And so the house stood silent and abandoned, its windows darkened by the weight of unspoken secrets and unresolved mysteries. The legacy of Samuel Whitfield endured, his enigmatic presence lingering in the shadows, a spectral guardian of a realm beyond mortal comprehension. As new families ventured into its depths, unaware of the malevolent gaze that watched from the darkness, the cycle of fear and fascination continued unabated, a testament to the enduring power of the unknown. Story 27. The mysterious package arrived without a return label or tracking number, just a damp cardboard box hinting at a hidden secret. It wasn't intended for Sarah Miller. The name was wrong, but her address was correct. She hesitated, knowing she should have ignored it, left it untouched on the porch. Yet curiosity beckoned her, urging her to unravel the enigma within. Carefully peeling back the tape, she anticipated mundane contents like books or clothes. However, what awaited her was far from ordinary, a VHS tape accompanied by a solitary sticky note that read, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic cassette in her hands, sensing an inexplicable weight to it, as if carrying the burden of forbidden knowledge. Tracing her fingers along the worn edges, she felt the tape's imperfections, each one hinting at a hidden truth waiting to be unveiled. The handwritten note bore the marks of urgency, the pen pressing forcefully against the paper, leaving behind a message shrouded in mystery. Surrounded by the familiar sounds of her suburban neighborhood, a distant dog's bark, children's laughter, the drone of a lawnmower, Sarah brought the package inside, placing it on her kitchen counter. Doubt clouded her thoughts as she examined the name on the box, Daniel Whitaker, a stranger to her in a neighborhood where only the Johnsons had resided before. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had long departed to be closer to family, leaving behind a trail of unfamiliarity. Despite her inner conflict, Sarah's gaze drifted to her VCR, a relic of nostalgia gathering dust. There was a pull to the tape, a mystery beckoning her to unravel its secrets. Against her instincts, she slid the tape into the machine, the screen initially filled with static that gradually sharpened into focus. A dimly lit room appeared, illuminated by a single lamp casting shadows. The camera angle was askew, the setting hasty. A man sat in a wooden chair, his features obscured by darkness until he spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," he began. "If you're watching this, someone found you, which means they'll find me too." As Whitaker spoke, the truth unfurled a tale of innocence wronged, a framing orchestrated with meticulous precision. The room he sat in, stark and temporary, hinted at a life in perpetual motion, ready to flee at a moment's notice. His words bore the weight of a man burdened by circumstances beyond his control, a desperate plea for understanding in a world quick to judge. Detective Eliza Ramirez studied the VHS tape on her desk, one of many that had surfaced, each bearing Whitaker's haunting message. The case of Catherine Walsh's murder took a dark turn as the detective delved deeper into the intricate web of lies and deceit. Walsh's involvement in exposing a pharmaceutical company's malpractices added a layer of complexity to the investigation, revealing a sinister underbelly of power and corruption. The discovery of additional tapes, each shedding light on Whitaker's innocence, challenged the official narrative, throwing doubt on a case deemed closed. As Ramirez connected the dots, she unearthed a conspiracy that reached the highest echelons of power, a scheme to silence the truth at any cost. Sarah Miller's involvement in the unfolding drama proved pivotal as she received a second package, containing damning evidence that shifted the course of the investigation. Together with Ramirez, they followed Whitaker's trail, uncovering the dark machinations of a system designed to protect the guilty at the expense of the innocent. In a storage unit marked by a reflection caught on tape, the truth lay waiting to be revealed. Whitaker's journal, Catherine Walsh's evidence, and the sinister plans of those behind the frame-up were all laid bare, justice inching closer with each piece of evidence unearthed. And so justice prevailed not in a swift arrest, but through the relentless pursuit of truth, a truth that emerged from an unexpected package delivered to the wrong address. As Whitaker emerged from the shadows, vindicated yet scarred by his ordeal, Sarah stood by, a silent witness to the unraveling of a conspiracy that almost claimed an innocent life. In the quiet aftermath, as truth triumphed over deception, Sarah posed a question that lingered in the air, echoing the fragile balance between justice and manufactured lies. The VHS tapes, once symbols of manipulation, now stood as testaments to the resilience of truth, waiting for the curious souls willing to unveil their hidden messages in the stillness of the night.